Mr. Jones, I believe you're probably going to be the basis for presentation, please.
What you have before you, Commissioners, are a list of state and federal appropriation priorities. We'd asked for input from each of you over the last few weeks, and this is what has been compiled from that input. And certainly, today's the day. We're asking you to establish a formal list that we can begin working on. So that's where we'll start to work from, and wherever it ends up, wherever you choose to. Also, what you have in the packet are 2013 through 15 strategic goals, the state appropriation priorities from 2014, and the 2014 federal appropriation priorities. When we conclude today and we know what priorities you have, we'll do more legwork to get as much information together and make a presentation before our state and federal delegations. So we recommend you just start with that first document and vet each of those and come to some consensus as to how you like them ranked, and then we'll take it from there to put the backup material and data with it to make a presentation. I'm sorry. It says state and federal appropriations fiscal year 2015.
Okay. Before we go there, I'd like to make a comment, and it's the one that is your state appropriation priorities from 2014. I know you don't do everything, but staff certainly had a major role along with you and with the commissioners, and we got a lot accomplished. I've been with the county since 2000. I don't ever recall having seen this much of this significance accomplished during that period of time. So I applaud you, I applaud your staff, I applaud our county employees and the public who helped us get the fundings that we needed. So this is terrific, and I think it'll help us go forward then in 2015's new set of priorities so that we can be working together to get those done. So my thank you to you.
Well, we appreciate that, but it's a collaborative effort that starts right here with good direction and good support of the things that our staff does. But we do appreciate it. I too like to thank the staff for the hard work they put into it. But again, it starts with you guys, and we appreciate your supporting all our efforts. And to that end, let's not let last year be the standard, because I don't know if we can do that again. But we're going to give it everything we got. Yeah, we learned some things over the last couple of years of how to position ourselves, so we're going to work to that end.
We don't have a gubernatorial election this year.
Yeah.
We may have some changes.
I know that during the course of this past year, stormwater has been a #1 topic multiple times. So, and we'll give each commissioner a chance to talk on this. But from my standpoint, all these things are good programs, but whatever we can do, we've got to start working on that stormwater issue. So I think that's going to have to be one of my highest priorities. What I'd like to suggest is starting at the far end, have Commissioner Meadows give us some comments about what she thinks the priorities ought to be, and then we'll do Commissioner Jones on down this way.
Okay. Before I do the priorities, I have some things to add. Is that okay?
Sure.
I would like to add a recycling facility. Coastal Dune Lake bridges, repair of Alligator, Eastern Camp Creek. We need the $500,000 for Western Lake now, and we need Big Redfish Bridge now. We don't have any funding for that either. Funding to replace septic tanks on Coastal Dune Lakes and Choctawhatchee Bay. And paving of all dirt roads that drain into the bay and to the Coastal Dune Lakes. And last but not least, a senior center for South Walton. And as far as prioritizing, I think drainage to me is #1. I think Number 2 would be overlay of county road, the entire road, County Road 30A. That'd be number 2. You want to go 3, do we want to go down the whole list or just give our top 5?
We'll just give you top 5.
Okay. 3 would be, 3 would be the Coastal Dune Lake bridges repair. 4 would be paving all roads that drain into Choctaw Bay and Coastal Dune Lakes. And then 5 would be water and sewer along 331. So that would be my 1 through 5.
Repeat your number 4 again for me, Commissioner.
Number 4 would be pave all dirt roads that drain into Choctawhatchee Bay and any coastal dune lake.
Thank you. Commissioner Jones?
Okay, number 1 for me would be drainage, not just on CR 30A, but all over the county. I know on Mondays, if it's rained all weekend, I dread going in. So number 1 would be drainage. Number 2 would be water and sewer along US Highway 331. We're getting so business friendly, we're beginning to get, and so once we get this water and sewer in, this county's gonna really take off. So that would be number 2 for me. Number 3 would be sewer to area Choctawhatchee Bay residents. I've been meeting with the city of Freeport some, and I know Cliff has talked to us about a grant, a matching grant, and it seems like an enormous amount. It was, maybe close to $1 million, but then we got several million match. So that's something I'd really like to look at to get the sewage off Choctawhatchee Bay. Number 4 would be the rural health clinics, and number 5 would be the overlay of County Road 30A. And I talked to Dee Dee about 331 4-laning all the way to Alabama, and although it's not on here, it's in the progress, in progress, in the works. So.
Yeah, the TPO also has that as one of their priorities now too, so hopefully we can help that get further along.
It's just exciting to see the south end done. That's truly, thank you.
Commissioner, on number 4, the rural health clinics. Is that Mossy Head Paxton, or is that additional?
Well, there was 3 areas that we prioritized, Mossy Head, Paxton, and then out by Commissioner Chapman's. We're only a 2-day-a-week thing in Mossy Head and Paxton. If we can continue to get them funding,
Okay.
they could be expanding. I was told that Paxton was doing 85% capacity and Mossy Head was doing 90% capacity, so
Doing pretty well.
that'll be important.
Okay.
Commissioner Chapman?
Well, the list contains quite a few important projects, and hard and sometimes it's difficult to prioritize one over the other one. I was glad to see Commissioner Meadows add the paving of dirt roads that impact the bay and the coastal dune lakes. My district is primarily along the river, which dumps into the bay, and I have majority roads, well, actually all the roads east of 81 that are dirt are they dump down into the Choctawhatchee River, which gets to the bay. I think my priorities would be the one thing that we dealt with last year or so, and that's the drainage improvements, not only on 30A, but we have some issues in other sections of the county. Number 2 is to try and move along the 331 water and sewer in the new roadway there. 3 is another impact to the bay, and that's the sewers to the Choctawhatchee Bay residents. The other one, let's see, that'd be number 4. I know we wanted to try, and we've been trying to get a rural clinic out into the valley, Uchiana Valley View, that neck of the woods down there. And I'd like to try and work on getting that done for there, since we got one in Mossy Head now and in Paxton. That's the other basically uncovered area as far as rural health care. I got a lot of elderly residents there. And then I guess number 5 would be the coastal dune lakes, bridge culverts issue. Now, as far as, we still got it on here, Bill, and I know that you were, and I have talked about it publicly about potable water system for an area in the rural section in my district. I know it's $3.5 million plus, and you may let the rest of the board know where I'm at on that. I've reached out to everybody I can think of, including the state folks. It doesn't seem right now that we can come up with any of the funding to do it because it won't sustain itself or keep it operational without them going into the red at the present time due to the number of residents there. But it's something that would be nice if we can get, but I'm just thinking right now, financially, feasibility is not there.
One of the things that I had mentioned to your aide earlier, Bill, was that there's been some recent developments on modifications that can be made to their existing wells that they're on. Perhaps that could help them, and I'd like to see us explore that. I don't want to make this necessarily one of the priorities here, but as we go through the year, have staff take a look to see can some of these advertised modifications to wells help to improve the quality of the water that's out there. But we can take that up during the regular course of action. Okay? So did you give us number 5? Was rural clinics, right?
No, the coastal dune lakes.
Coastal
Coastal dune lakes.
Okay. Commissioner Commander.
Yes. My number 1, as everybody else's, is drainage, stormwater, along 38 as well as every other road in this county. It is our major problem at this point. And number 2 for me would be water and sewer along US 331. So water and sewer is key to our development and our continued growth. Number 3 for me would be sewer to the Choctawhatchee Bay residents and coastal dune lakes. I think those should be combined. Number 4 for me, of course, is broadband connectivity. There's so many people that are calling, and I think Lewis can verify this, calling almost Walton County daily, wanting to know about, they want to move here, they want to work from South Walton, but they need, internet. I mean, so many more of our residents can benefit if we have adequate broadband, so that would be my number 4. And my number 5 is dirt roads that drain into the bays as well as the lakes. Of course, I am hoping that maybe we will get some Transocean money soon, and we can use some of that money to work on the sewer on the coastal dune lakes and the Choctawhatchee Bay as well as the dirt roads. So those are my 5.
Thank you. I think it looks like we have a unanimous number 1, which is your drainage down there. My number 2 is the overlay of County Road 30A. I think it's important that we do whatever we can to help that problem down there. We need to keep that vital, and we need to keep it growing and keep it intact. So I think that should be our number 2. My number 3, and we're getting down to ones that are all pretty close together here. I'd like to see us get the expansion of the rural health clinic and to expand the days that it's currently now provided to both Paxton and Mossy Head. My number 4 is the water and sewer along US Highway 331. And my number 5 would be paving all dirt roads that go into the bay. So I think that's what the commission has initially started. What I would like to do is see, is there any public comments or additions that you think we should be considering at this time with regards to our priorities for the upcoming year or 2? Seeing none. Can you take a couple minutes and see how we've ranked them and give us an idea what our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be?
Sure. Give us just a few minutes.
Also, too, could we just list the rest of them, maybe in the order in which I can?
Yeah.
List all the rest of them, and then, if we have grants or if we have other funding mechanisms that we would agree
I think
that they're all important. We'd all like
And
to
I
see.
think our legislative delegation should know that they're also
Okay.
priorities. However, our top 5 that we would really like to push are, and that we can help focus on some of the things that we may or may not be able to get through the legislature this time.
Yeah, we'll make sure that as we prepare our documents to take to the legislature, that all of these are represented. And
Okay.
Billy Williams is here, doing our restore work, so he certainly heard what our priorities are as well. And we'll run it through that seam as well, because there's certainly, you never know where funding may be found for what things, but.
Okay, great.
But we will do that.
Okay,
You can't get it if you don't ask, right?
that's right. If you don't put it on the list, you might miss it.
Well, I know that we've got some new legislative thing. Brad Drake is there and is willing to listen to what
Okay.
he can do for Walton County, and hopefully that will help too. And certainly in the past year, Don Gates in the Senate was a major supporter for Walton County, even though he is no longer the president of the Senate.
Right.
He's still there, so we will continue to ask him to help us, help ourselves on this.
All right. The first, obviously, is the drainage improvements along 30A and countywide. The second would be water and sewer along US 331. Third would be sewer availability on the Choctawhatchee Bay residents. Fourth would be the rural health clinics, just sustaining the ones we have and expansion. And number 5 would be paving the dirt roads that lead to the bay and the coastal dune lakes. So we will work up details on each of those and to the best we can, the cost of getting there. We will look at the rest of them that have been listed and we'll begin to work on putting together the appropriate documentation and support to make those requests.
Could we add, as Sarah suggested, number 3, you said sewer on the bay, also on the coastal dune lakes?
Sure.
Just to combine them.
Sure.
Bay and coastal dune lakes, just in the event that, we're
And the
able to
dirt-
do
and the
that.
dirt roads there, then on the bay and the coastal.
And the coastal dune lakes, right, okay.
And Commissioners, last time we did it on a 2-year basis for setting the priorities. Do you want to continue to go on a 2-year basis for this? Give us a chance to make some more accomplishments? Okay,
Yeah.
I think it's
Okay.
consensus, we'll do a 2-year set.
These will be our 15, 16 priorities.
Okay. Any other comments?
Just for the board's edification, next week, Cliff Nauer and I will be traveling to Tallahassee to meet with Florida DOT. And it's mainly in regards to what Commissioner Meadows brought up about paving of these dirt roads that dump in there. We're gonna, apparently he's got us an audience over there with some powers to be, and hopefully we can convince them to help assist us on paving out those dirt roads we got.
Okay.
Anything else, Commissioners? Thank you. Thank you all for attending. Commissioner Jones?
Father God, we just thank you. We're honored that we can come before you this night. We ask that we invite you into county business, and we ask, Lord, that you've heard even the state and federal appropriations. You've heard the things that we're seeking the state and federal government for, and we ask that you intervene and give us favor and give us the money to do the things that we need to do. And Father, I say a special prayer for J.C. Alford, even, Lord, as he's gone right now, he's in surgery, emergency surgery. God, we just speak life and not death. We speak health and healing. We ask that you strengthen his family, God, and we just thank you, Lord, that your hand is upon him. Your hand is upon the surgeon right now. And we ask, God, that you minister to those that have the flu and that are sick, and it just seems to be so rampant. So we ask all these things, and be with us as we make important decisions tonight. In Jesus' name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call this meeting to order. Before we start, I'd like to take a moment personally to thank my fellow commissioners, staff, and many of you from the public for the thoughts and the prayers that you all put forth during the period of my family's bereavement. I and my family are truly appreciative of it, and I just wanted to tell you sincerely, I thank you to each and every one of you, and thank you for being my family as well. Okay. I guess, all right, Mr. Jones, additions and deletions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Under additions, we'd like to add that we need to ratify the priority list that we made at the workshop earlier today, so we will ask you to do that under admin. Under county attorney, asking you to add the request to authorize the chairman to sign a general release and settlement agreement with Raymond Shaw for and on behalf of Walton County and the Florida Association of Counties Trust. And then we're going to ask you to remove from the agenda item 3 under the TDC, which is a request to approve to advertise and hold 3 staff public workshops to receive public input on the potential design of beach access improvements.
Thank you. It's the wishes of the board.
Motion to approve changes to the agenda.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve as amended.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, any public comments we have with regard to the agenda? Yes, ma'am. I recognized you. Ma'am, I've recognized. Okay, ma'am, we're going to follow board procedure. Your hand went up first. I'm going to ask you to come up first, or I'm just going to pass and go to him.
Good afternoon. My name is Patricia Whitbeck,
You want to spell the last name, please?
Witbeck, and I live in Driftwood Estates, and I have since 2005. I am a recently elected member of their board of directors of the Homeowners Association, so I feel that it is my responsibility to come here today and to talk to you a little bit about some information that has come to light. And I believe all of you have been provided copies of emails and data, actual documented information concerning Driftwood Estates.
Is this part of what's under the lawsuit?
I don't think that my comments really will deal with the lawsuit, sir. I'm really here today because I was reminded yesterday by the military exercises that were going on in our area, and as the helicopters flew down over my home, of all the men and women that are fighting for a good cause and allow us to have the freedom of speech here in this country, in this county. And as I waved to them and saw the colors of their coats and their faces, I'm confident that all of you feel as I do, that I should be allowed to speak. I've never spoken before here, so I request that I be allowed to make a couple of comments. I really want to deal with the safety issue, the public safety issue, concerning a road that has been built in our community back in the 1970s, and when there was probably less than 100 people that lived in our community. And now we have over 1,000 people living in our community, and there has been no additions or upgrades to any egress or incoming traffic to our area. I'm here on behalf of the people in our community that have health requirements. We have autistic children that live in our neighborhood. We have families that have children that have diabetes. And we have, we all know that we have a public safety issue. And my question really, and I just want to know, as we're all reasonable human beings, and I'm assuming you're reasonable as well, and that perhaps it's time for us all to take a renewed look at Driftwood and before we keep going forward in the county and dealing with new problems and new projects that come up, can't we please take another look at Driftwood and see if there isn't something that some conclusion that we can come to that we would all consider to be reasonable. I wanted to read to you a little bit of why we're talking about, we prayed today for the federal and state grants to provide the money to come into the county to help us make improvements to where we live. And I guess one question I want to know, an answer that I need is, why was a $1 million grant application that was made to the state of Florida withdrawn back in 2010, for instance? I suspect this was actually, the grant application withdrawal was signed by Commissioner Brannon at the time, and but we're praying for more money, and yet a grant application for $1 million that dealt with public safety for the Driftwood community was withdrawn. And I believe that may have been under Cecilia or Cindy.
Ma'am, just address the chair, please.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Please address the chair.
Okay. So that's a question I have. Why would the county commissioners have withdrawn an application for a $1 million grant to improve the road system in that area?
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Yeah. I wasn't here in 2010, so I don't
Right,
know.
but anyhow, we'll deal with the county attorney on that later.
Alex Kish, 1715 Driftwood Point Road.
Spell your last name, please, sir.
Kish. I have a handout for y'all, if I can be allowed to hand it to you. For some
Pertaining
paperwork.
to?
Pertaining to what Ms. Whitbeck was just speaking on, the grant.
Is this part of a matter that's part of a lawsuit?
I don't know how to answer that as part of the Driftwood problems.
Because the board is not going to take any public comment on anything it's part of a ongoing lawsuit.
Is that just for Driftwood people, or
No,
is that for the regular
that's a
public?
policy that the board adopted in December of 2012. That any lawsuit that's going on, we're not going to take as part of public comment anything dealing with that lawsuit.
Can I speak on this grant?
You can speak on the
You're the
grant.
one you're the one that has jumped to the lawsuit. I have not.
I'm
I'm
asking you if your comments deal with a lawsuit, and if they deal with a
Well, you're
lawsuit,
eating up all my time right now, but
Well-
this isn't dealing with a lawsuit so much as it's dealing with a grant that...
if you've got
that
comments,
we've-
make them. But if you get into the lawsuit area, I'll ask you to please stop.
Fair enough. Again, I'd like to hand you these handouts just so you have them. I'd like you to make aware of what your own documents show. Which has supported what we've been trying to work out with the county since 2005. That's 10 years. And your own documents show with your own people saying that Driftwood is a problem. You filled out grant paperwork in 2010 that depicts Driftwood as a safety hazard. I can read it. It's pretty damning that it says, there's a problem there. For 5 years, we've heard how we didn't, from 2005 to 2010. What I'm asking is, can you look at your own documents? Can you look at what your own people have said to you? I'm not here to attack anybody personally up here. I'm asking the board for some consideration. I can show you all this with your own documents. Nothing that I have to go and spend the money that a lot of us have to try to help you as a board, help us as citizens. What I'd like you to do is look at the application. It was put in after Mr. Alvarez had come to, we had come to an agreement in some sense that the special magistrate that was hired to help get to a resolve with us as citizens that was never implemented. And then afterwards, we put in this grant for $1 million+, and it was left to expire. We weren't, as citizens, even let known that grant was happening. I just recently found out about this. That could have helped us as citizens, and you as a board help us get our problems fixed. I just don't understand why it was let to expire. It's obvious that the state was interested in giving you all this money. You had petitioned on our behalf. You had not included us in the correspondence. We would have helped. If you couldn't have filled out the paperwork, I don't mean you, Mr. Enfield, I don't mean anybody in particular on the board, I mean Walton County as a whole. Had you included us, we would have help us. But again, we're not part of the process. And so it's very disappointing to see that type of money that could have helped this situation that has spiraled, in my opinion, out of control in our neighborhood. So beyond that, I would ask the board, whether you want to say this is a lawsuit or not, I would ask the board to reconsider meeting with us. If we can't get I cannot understand how this board and our residents cannot get together and come up with some kind of long-term goal if that's what it takes. Not everything has to be right now. We've waited for 10 years. We're not going away. We have to fix what we have. This is our biggest investment for most of us of our whole life, just like your home would be for you. I'm sorry that some of the things have gotten personal. I don't feel like I've been part of that personality conflict, but I'm here to help resolve it. I'm here to listen to y'all. I would hope that you guys would listen to us. I hope you could look at some of your own paperwork and maybe take a fresh look at this situation.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Now, you're saying that this was withdrawn by the county.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any backup on
I can
who
provide.
withdrew it and all
Scott
that kind of
Brannon,
thing? Okay.
Commissioner Brandon withdrew it, who had recused himself at the time.
Withdrew it from the
Grant application, but what we didn't do as a county is the state had asked us for some follow-up information. We just didn't do it.
Okay,
Several
so-
emails. We have a whole chain of emails.
So the
I can
response
give
for additional information was never done.
you. Just sat on somebody's desk, I guess, or it wasn't done for whatever reason. We don't know.
Was this to DEP or FEMA or what kind of, who was the grant to?
State of Florida Joint Hazards Mitigation Grant Program, Florida Mitigation Assistance Application.
Okay. Yeah,
Where
this is the
the
first
county
time.
lists the places of severe weather
Into legal stuff?
and flood area. It talks about grave dangers to the residents. This is y'all filling this out, not me.
Right.
Not my,
I don't know.
not
Does
my
anybody know what happened?
fellow residents.
No, but I don't think the board's going to be able to answer that right now. So
I wouldn't
we'll-
expect you to.
We'll provide it to staff. We'll provide it to staff and have them take a look and research.
I would like you to. I would
Thank you.
like to hear back, and I would like to, again, offer an olive branch to speak
Thank you.
and try to resolve this.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Could I make a comment, please?
Yes, ma'am.
I was here when the special magistrate came in.
Yes, ma'am.
And one of his recommendations is that the county meet with you on Driftwood on a regular basis.
Yes, ma'am.
And I remember the conversation of, this doesn't cost us anything. We need to be doing that, and if we're not doing that now, then I highly would like to have staff or whoever, I'm sure Ms. Meadows or anyone that's willing. I think we should, and to, and thank you for the olive branch, because we really truly want to work with you. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. Let's
Thank you,
hope
Mr.
that can
Bishop.
happen. Thank you.
Mr. Osborne, your hand was up next.
I'm not going to talk about the lawsuit, but I will point out that you
Name and
just...
spell your last name for the record, please.
My name's Alan Osborne, for the record, Osborne.
Thank you.
I hate to tell you, but y'all had the crap suit out of you by Mr. Becknell's corporation, and you took a day and a half of testimony from him in a public hearing. And so I'd like to see that policy on who can and can't testify about what's going on, because public comment is just that. It's public comment. You don't have to answer back, and you don't have to
Well, we're not,
incriminate.
Mr. Osborne, right now, we're not going to give a forum to talk about a lawsuit when the board can't answer back, because that's not the way we do it.
I'm not talking about the lawsuit.
Okay.
But I mean, to
But
say
I'm
that, it
answering
hasn't been
I'm answering your
enforced, or-
observation right now.
Okay. What I want to know is, I filed a code enforcement complaint 3 months ago. And it's valid, on a valid ordinance, and it was done by sworn deposition on this exact information. And that's not in the lawsuit, neither is the grant. Now, Ms. Meadows, I have the email trails.
Alan, address the chair.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I have the emails that Ms. Meadows asked about from this county and from the state, and nobody ever responded. Not a single response was given. Now, according to what I have in my code enforcement complaint, nobody, and your county attorney stood up and told me he had this months ago. Not an answer. But when somebody else filed a code enforcement complaint, not by a sworn affidavit like I did, like your policy says, no, action was taken immediately and continues to every day. Yet, We've asked for a compliance hearing on that ordinance. That's not in the lawsuit. We've asked for code enforcement on the ordinance. Nothing's happened, yet it's happened for other people. You can't keep treating us different. I don't care how personal, like you said, it is. Everybody's entitled to equal enforcement of the law, and we should be treated no different. You were asked in the grant money for us to provide engineering data. Y'all stood up here for years and testified that Greg Graham ran all those numbers. Why couldn't he produce them to the state? You told the DCA up here, and here's a letter from your guys. You told the DCA there wasn't a problem here. Then you wrote a state grant and swore to it, that we were having a life safety issues out there, and that the road did flood, and we didn't have access, because that was the truth. Alan Brown told the truth. We shouldn't be up here fighting this. And I want to know why my code enforcement complaint can't be enforced fairly. It should take about 10 minutes to drive down that road, read the ordinance, and look and see if anybody's building or not. Nobody has done a thing. Nothing for 10 years. And I'll tell you, we're coming to a day of reckoning on this, where the truth, and it's not my experts in the code enforcement complaint, it's the words of your staff and the past people in this county, the emails that said if you'd have listened to me in 04, 05, you wouldn't have been in that mess with the compliance hearing, because I was 100% right. And I can't get your planning director to come up here and say, even in public, yes, we have an ordinance. We have a code enforcement complaint in the planning department, and nobody wants to do anything without an attorney. I want to know how many code enforcement complaints are automatically turned over to an attorney when you get them. Just mine, Mr. Chairman? I've had it. I'd like some action on this, because I'm not giving up. Everybody in this room could give up. I'll be standing here if I ain't got nothing left but my boxers. You can bet on it.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Janet Stevenson, Stevenson. I've owned a home in Inlet Beach since 2003. Before that, I owned a condo in Inlet Beach. I'm here today to talk about the agenda item pertaining to the South Wall Street subdivision major development order under your quasi-judicial items at the very end of the agenda.
We will be taking testimony at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anything else? Okay. Next item is the consent agenda.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we mentioned earlier, we added to our agenda for you to confirm and approve the top 5 priorities for our state and federal appropriation and legislative requests for the coming year. In order, those were drainage improvements countywide, including 30A, water and sewer capacity along US 331 and the expansion of 331, sewer for residential dwelling units along Choctawhatchee Bay that are currently serviced by septic tanks, maintaining and expanding our rural health clinics, maintaining the one in Mossy Head and Paxton, and expanding to one in the Valley View area. Then our number 5 was to pave all dirt roads that lead to the Choctawhatchee Bay and the coastal dune lakes. So by your motion and approval, those will be confirmed as our top 5 legislative priorities for the coming year, both state and federal.
Motion to approve. Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Next item, Mr. Danny Henson is going to make a presentation of a community rating system. Wayne?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we have Mr. Danny Henson here. Danny is with the State of Florida Division of Emergency Management, the CRS coordinator. This is regarding the community rating system that the county has been accepted into, and I'll have Danny come up and he can tell us all about it.
Good afternoon. My name is Danny Henson. I'm with the Florida Division of Emergency Management, and I'm representing the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
Humor me, sir. Please spell your last name for the record.
Danny Henson, Hinson.
Thank you.
Regular spelling of Danny. I'm representing the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Insurance Services Office, and the Community Rating System as an employee of the State Division of Emergency Management. I want to recognize Walton County for its outstanding job in entering the Community Rating System. Basically, the Community Rating System is a voluntary part of the National Flood Insurance Program, and it affords the residents who have floodplain policies a discount, up to 20% discount. This cumulative number, that the savings that the residents who have policyholders equates to $938,000 of savings annually. The fact that Walton County came in as a Class 6, the ranking is 1 to 10, or 10 is a no credit, 1 is the best ranking. Currently, Class 5 is the best we have in the state. So the fact that Walton County came in as a Class 6 far exceeds what just about any other community has been able to accomplish, other than just a handful. So it's a significant benefit to your residents, this $938,000 annually savings for flood policies. And basically it's recognizing the fact that you do have standards that exceed the National Flood Insurance Program, and as a result benefits these policyholders in their flood insurance premiums. So on behalf of FEMA, I do have a plaque here that I'd like to present to you, Mr. Chairman, if I could, in recognition of the great efforts that Walton County and the staff have been able to achieve.
That light doesn't. Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, this has been a long-standing goal for the county. We worked many years on this, and there's some people in the county I'd like to recognize that work very hard. A lot of data has to be accumulated, and a lot of information has to be provided, and things of that nature. If I could, I'd like to just name some of the people who were involved from the county staff. The first being Renee Bradley, Misty Farrell, Hal Laird, Brian Underwood, Janet Trinka, Flora Morrow, Michelle Wilson, Kevin Laird, Aaron Craker, Sam Sandelman, Harold Bingham, Gary Demers, Donna Free, Russell Beatty, and Dan Owens. These people work very closely with us and with Hal and his staff, trying to, again, qualify for the CRS, and they did some outstanding work and put in a lot of time and effort to get this. So I'm very proud of them. Thank you.
Our thanks to them, and Mr. Henson, again, thank you very much. We appreciate the recognition. Thank you so much.
Yeah, to that end, you've heard there was nearly $1 million a year that's back in the hands of our people that they can spend on other things. So certainly good. Next item, Mr. Chairman, is a request to hold a special meeting on Tuesday, February 24th at 8 a.m. Prior to our board meeting in Funiac Springs to interview the top 3 engineering firms who responded to RFQ 015-008 for engineering services on County Road 181C and RFQ 015-009 for engineering services on Walton Bridge Road project. You had asked previously that staff narrow those submitters down to 3 and let you review those 3, and that's what we'll be doing at this time.
Motion.
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Motion to approve the
Second.
special meeting.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries.
Next item, Mr. Chairman, is a request to approve change order number 2 to contract 014-018 with Mid-South Paving for County Road 1084 improvements in the amount of $6,000 and an increase of time of 25 days. I believe your packet says 28, but it's 25 days. In the original bid documents, there was a section of box culvert that was missed that requires a special type of pile to hold the guardrails. So this change order allows that. to be considered in this contract. So we'd recommend approval.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any board discussion? Public comment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Next item, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, is a request to allow Public Works environmental staff to schedule a public workshop for staff to solicit public comments on the proposed draft artificial reef management plan. We're requesting that on Tuesday, March 3rd, here at the South Walton Annex Boardroom.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Next item, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask Chance Powell to come forward. In October the 28th, the board accepted the AVCON parking study. At that time, you asked staff to review each of their recommendations and to bring back further recommendations to the board. Our engineering staff, along with Public Works and the TDC, has reviewed each of those recommendations and is prepared to make further recommendations to the board this evening regarding which projects they believe are viable and feasible. We just remind you that all of these have been through numerous public workshops, public hearings, so Chance will brief you on their findings, and we'll ask for staff's direction at that time. Thank you, Chance.
Chance Powell for the record, Powell. I've got a handout here that I want to hand out to you guys. As Mr. Jones was saying, we looked at the 16 sites that AVCON recommended for some parking improvements. We evaluated these based on the ownership, utility conflicts, drainage, access management, environmental impact, constructability, cost of construction, and the number of parking spaces provided. We also got with TDC staff on these to get their input. And we came back with a ranking of 8 sites that we felt would meet a short-term need. Just because a site did not make it on this does not mean that it would not be considered at some other point if the board sees that that's fit. And then also, if you have any questions about, why this list was why, how it came to be exactly, I'd be glad to sit down with any of you and, go over our notes and maybe get Brian with TDC to meet with us on that. Number 1, from 1 through 8, just 8 sites that we considered here, is the Scenic 30A and County Road 283 right-of-way parking, which that's right there at the intersection of 283 and 30A, just north of some of the shops there. It's adjacent to the bike path. And staff would also recommend that this be considered to be constructed with the Western Lake pedestrian bridge improvements. I think it would be a great opportunity for us to do all that construction at one time. Number 2 is the Blue Mountain Beach Regional Beach Access. This would be improvements, right-of-way improvements there just north of Blue Mountain Beach Road on County Road 283. It's parallel parking, as AVCON pointed out there. Number 3 is the 393 Eastern Lake right-of-way. This would be the Eastern Lake Road. There's a north road and a south road of Eastern Lake. One Gulf front, the next one is just immediately north of that. This would be some parallel parking there, just close to that Eastern Lake neighborhood beach access. Number 4 is the Fort Panic 30A right-of-way parallel parking. Number 5 is Gulfview Heights. This would be 20 spaces that AVCON identified there. That's a 100-foot right-of-way at a regional beach access. Number 6 is the Walton Dunes improvements. It's right there on Beachfront Trail. Number 7 is I need to go back to number 3. It's 393 Eastern right-of-way. That's 393 right there adjacent to Gulf Place. And then number 7 is Eastern Lake. That's the neighborhood beach access down where Eastern Lake Road. And then number 8 is the property north of Ed Walleen. It's the vacant property that AVCON considered for a large parking lot.
And just be sure to look at that note. $420,000 does not include the purchase of the property. That would just be for the construction.
That's right. The total construction fees for these 264 spaces that's identified here is approximately 1.6 million. That does not include engineering, design, and permitting. Most all of these sites would require stormwater permitting and construction for a stormwater facility. So please note that.
Commissioner Commander?
You could tell I had a, yeah.
I could tell.
The property north of Ed Walleen, 420,000. I know we need stormwater there, but do we necessarily have to pave it? I mean, to me, that is one of the most ideal places. I am really not in favor of improving neighborhood accesses because of that first word, neighborhood. So I have a tendency not to want to crowd into neighborhoods. But anywhere, of course, I mean, I actually agree with Blue Mountain Beach because that's not a neighborhood, but that property north of Ed Walleen, couldn't we just do stormwater but not pave it? Would that cut the costs down?
I believe that that parking lot identified as number 8 there north of Ed Walleen is a regional beach access point.
But I'm talking about the that's what I'm talking about, the lot that we're talking about. Do we have to pay it?
We don't own it. We don't know if
That's
it's
right.
for sale yet either. We leased it last summer, and I think this is just a cost to, if we did own it.
That's right.
So, I agree. I think we could make it impervious, but
I'm not sure that you'd have to actually pave it. We looked at paving these sites. For instance, Geronimo Street was also identified by AvCon to add some parking. And there's 50 delineated spaces there now if you count the parking curbs. So if that was something the county or the TDC wanted to look at whenever, if this become available with purchase of that property, if that happened, then yeah, maybe just delineating those spaces with some parking curbs or some other kind of measure to make sure that you're getting the parking that you're planning on getting.
yeah, Chance, are these cost estimates? Do these all include paving with asphalt?
Yes, ma'am. That would be that's considered an asphalt type system with most likely either a subsurface drainage facility like an exfiltration system or an open swell, depending on what the site we felt like would provide.
Okay, because I know AvCon in some cases said, well, that it didn't need to be paved, that we could put gravel down or something like that. It could be not necessarily have to pave all of them. Is that something that would reduce the cost of this 1.6?
Quite possibly, and once some hard engineering was done with the benefit of a survey and some geotechnical work to figure out what the groundwater table was like and things like that, that could be considered at that point. Absolutely.
Chance, have you worked with Mr. Bagby to talk about some of the other off-site parking areas he's trying to develop as well, so that they would complement each other?
I know that they're looking at some off-site areas and some other opportunities to get people to the beach. I've spoke with Brian and Dave about those, but I know that process, from what I understand, is still in the works.
I'd like to make sure there's no conflict between what they're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to accomplish.
I don't believe so. I know Dave and Brian Kellenberger both looked at this list. Matter of fact, they even made some modifications to it. And I know Mr. Bagby's had the benefit of it as well.
I have a question. Have y'all considered some golf cart parking? I know probably 2 golf carts could get in a car, but I know like at Eastern Lake, there's so many golf carts now, and there's very little places for even those to go. So could that be a possibility to look into that?
Absolutely. Once the actual right-of-way was surveyed and a topographic survey was provided and a real good hard design was began, we could look at, making sure that was golf cart delineated spaces were available.
And bike racks, of course.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
What did we ever do? Somebody please refresh my memory. I'm getting old. We looked at one point of doing a parking garage near Pompano Joe's in there somewhere.
Yes, ma'am. That was actually addressed in AvCon's report.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned, as a short-term sort of measure here to provide parking, that was not considered by staff because of the cost. Specifically on that site, it's the site just north of the Pompano Joe's Park-In or the Miramar Beach Regional Beach Access. There's 50 spaces on the north side of Scenic Gulf Drive. TDC built that site, I'd say probably 4 or 5 years ago. I can't remember, maybe 6 years ago. The AVCON study proposed 125 spaces in a parking garage at a cost of roughly $23,000 per space. The tough thing there is that you'd have to go back and rebuild the existing 50 spaces at $23,000 a space just to get the rest of the second 2 floors
Just to get
built.
25
Yeah,
more spaces.
so the additional 75 spaces wind up
75.
costing you around $38,000 a space. Very high. Whereas some of these other spaces are running about $5,000 to $7,500 a space.
Wasn't the thing back then that they didn't think it would be pretty, but, you know,
Well, yeah, there's always the look of the garage, and
hey.
one of the things I'd like to see is, number one, this is part of an ongoing project. The bridge, Western Lake Bridge, has been funded. There's going to be a sidewalk all the way to. I'd like to see us go ahead with that project so that we could dovetail it in with the plans for construction and design that are going on right now. So I definitely would like to see us move forward with number one.
What about the others?
The others, number 5, Gulfview Heights. I've gotten numerous emails and comments from the citizens out there. I'd like to go out there and look at that one more time and see exactly what.
If, Mr. Chairman, if we could make a suggestion, if the board is a consensus to move forward with one, let's turn engineering and those folks loose and get that moving. And let's take the rest of them, and as you mentioned with TDC and what they're working on, make sure we have good coordination and on the ones Commissioner just mentioned. But let's all take a look at it and make sure where we're trying to get to. But if one is, the board agrees, we'll move forward and start that project.
Well, isn't Gulfview Heights a dead-end street?
Yes, ma'am. It dead ends into the Gulf right there.
It leads to is it a regional access?
Yes, ma'am.
It's a regional access down there.
It's right behind Goat
Each one
Feathers.
individually right now?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
You want to take each one individually right now?
Well, if Commissioner Meadows suggested moving forward with one and coordinate it with the Western Lake Bridge improvements, if the board agrees to do that.
And I think
turn them loose.
number 2 and number 3 are pretty easy to move forward with because they're pretty much right-of-way parking. So we could also move forward with that. They don't necessarily have to be paid, but just
1, 2, and 3. All right.
Fort Panic 30A right-of-way. Number 4, we could move forward with that. Move forward number 8 and looking into purchasing that property.
Yeah.
The Ed Walleen property, maybe, perhaps. Eastern Lake, that's fairly easy as well.
Yeah.
I think the 2 that are Gulfview Heights and Walton Dunes are the ones that are,
I agree.
I think that we need to do a little bit more looking at.
Okay.
I agree.
Would your motion be that items 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, and 8 we go forward with?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any further commissioner discussion?
If I would make a comment on number 8, that is to just check into the purchase of the property because it's.
Yeah.
We're not ready to move forward on it.
And if we can't purchase it, we need to lease it for this upcoming
We
season.
definitely,
We need to get
and
right.
Jim may have some additional information on that Ed Walleen piece that, we need to lease it again this summer.
Okay. We can work on that.
But,
We have a
yeah.
motion and a second then for those items to go forward with staff. Looking for any public comment on that.
Question is, where would the funding come from?
I believe this is TDC funding.
I'm looking at Mr. Bagby myself.
He's shaking his head no.
These are, it's my understanding, these are principally for the benefit of the tourists. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That would be my opinion if you're asking me.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Has a difference of opinion.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Powell.
We're going to bring back to you a resolution with a legislative finding saying that at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
That the projects you authorized today will benefit primarily tourists, so we'll have a legislative finding.
That's all we have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bagby. You're not Mr. Bagby.
In lieu of Mr. Bagby's item 2, I have item 1 for you today, John Irvin, ERVIN from the TDC. And we have opportunity in front of you that was unanimously recommended by the TDC Council last week when we met. And it is an opportunity with NBC Sports and the Golf Channel to talk about this destination as one of two in the state of Florida that would be considered. It's not new monies, it's budgeted monies. We just did not have this opportunities detail 9 months ago when we submitted the plans to y'all. So we're very fortunate that Visit Florida did all the work in negotiating, getting the national audience as an opportunity under the state's efforts. So I have more information, but I don't want to belabor it if there isn't questions. But this would be to recommend to proceed with the agreement with Visit Florida and Golf Channel NBC Sports.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further commission comment? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No? Did you vote no, Commissioner?
She voted yes.
Was it a late yes?
Yeah, I'm doing three things at once. That was a motion, yes.
Okay. It's 5-0, yes. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And that was a motion to approve and authorize the chairman to sign the agreement. So I just want to make sure that we captured that on the record. Item number 2, Mr. Chairman, was also unanimously approved by the TDC at their meeting last week. And this is year 2 of the contract with Choctawhatchee Basin Alliance to allow them to further develop and execute beyond the beach ecotourism tours. And so, subject to any questions, we'd ask that you approve and authorize the chairman to sign that agreement on behalf of the county.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 3 was removed. Item number 4, our building, you authorized, and we included the timeline in the agreement, but basically you had authorized the construction or reconstruction improvements at the TDC building once the previously designed building in the state forest had been discontinued. That plan had been discontinued. You authorized 60 days with change order 1. You authorized an additional 30 days. What happened is they took on top of that, on top of those 90 days, an additional 64 days to complete the renovations to the building. There are liquidated damages were authorized in the contract that the county executed, and what we're coming to you, we have tried to work out a resolution between the attorneys and ourselves and Lord and Son and their attorneys, and so the attorneys recommended we bring it to you for resolution. What the TDC unanimously recommended, what staff is recommending, is that we charge Lord and Son $8,160 in liquidated damages. That would basically be 25% of what they owe for taking the additional 64 days beyond the contract.
So there's sufficient money in the holdback in order to make a final payment?
Yes, sir.
Minus the amount you're recommending?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So wishes of the board.
So moved.
Second. I'll back her up for discussion.
Commissioner, this will essentially be an offer to Lord and Son to settle it for that amount. We've had communications back and forth. Whether that's accepted or not, I couldn't represent to you today, but it would essentially be an offer to them to accept that amount.
Mr. Bagby, how come it took so long? It went beyond what they contracted for?
Well, there were several reasons. There's a letter from Mr. Lord in there where there was mold up underneath the floor, and they say that they didn't know that was that subfloor. The plywood had to be removed. Their plan had always been to just insulate the bottom of it, but they didn't realize how bad it was till they got in there, which there is some truth to that. Our counterpoint, I guess, in negotiations was you could have figured that out on day 1 or day 30 or 60 or 90. It didn't take you till April to figure that out. And so, but that's their rationale. Our observation and what we've documented, there were days where there would be 2 folks there. It was not a high priority project. And I understand that. It went from being a multi-million-dollar 11 or 12,000 square foot project to being a $288,000 renovation, and they just didn't apply the resources to get it done in time. That's the bottom line.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to make this our recommended offer. Any public comment? Seeing any additional board comment? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Our next item, Mr. Chairman, is Mr. Pickles, Sea Haven Consulting. Contract ends. He's asked to terminate it effective March 31st, 2015. We concur with that request. The TDC has unanimously recommended that you approve the coastal, the scope of services, the RFQ, or request for services, for a coastal management consultant, to approve posting that or bidding that out. Subject to your questions.
I'm sorry, what you asked me?
It's the desires of the board.
Request.
Motion to advertise bids for coastal management consultant.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further commission discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Final item is updates, Mr. Chairman. The bed tax for December came in. It was up 8.47% over December of the previous year. So far for this fiscal year, bed tax collections are up by 23.25%, which is almost $2 million in bed tax revenue just in the first quarter, first 3 months. We have 2 committee vacancies that we have currently advertising. One seat on the marketing committee and one on the destination improvement committee. And we are finally starting to get new items in with the new logo into the visitor center, which has seen about a 40% increase in the month of January in the number of visitors going through there. So the sign that actually says visitor center that's visible from the road is bringing people in. But we invite everyone to stop by the visitor center and see the items. This week we get in, I think, hats and golf shirts. We've got in ponchos, and we've got in Tervis tumblers, we've got in coffee mugs and some other things with the new logo.
Yes.
Subject to your questions, that's all we have.
You, Mr. Davis, getting closer to getting us our cover letter on the...
Yes, sir. I think the last thing we were waiting on, the Corps is providing a package that will go with the easement. I just want to make sure I knew exactly what was in the package before I finish my cover letter.
Thank you.
And we've got a conference call Friday morning,
That's right.
I want to say 9 o'clock, to go over that package.
So
The
we should have
time
it.
may be a little bit off there, though. Okay.
Commissioners, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item I have on the agenda is a request direction on whether to enter into contract negotiations with Environmental Research and Design, Inc. The principal is Dr. Harvey H. Harper III, a professional engineer, for the firm to perform the services detailed in the proposed work efforts of the firm's response to request for proposal, which is dated January 6, 2015, for the compensation request or some other compensation. As you might recall, this was the request that I go back and take a look at the special magistrate on Driftwood's report and see what the county had and had not done. And the largest thing, obviously, was to have some professional engineer, as Mr. Alvarez recommended, take a look at the drainage system in place, the drainage system that was provided for in the original DRI and any amendments, and then compare the two and provide...
Before you continue on, there's 2 commissioners that have potential conflicts. I have a business conflict. I've submitted my paperwork to the clerk. We're going to pass the gavel to Mr. Chapman.
Sorry about
for this item.
Have a conflict and submitted paperwork.
This proposal came as a response to a request for proposal. This gentleman came, frankly, extremely and highly recommended. I called a couple of engineers I knew. This is only a request for you to allow me to approach him to talk about entering into a contract to do this work. His proposed work efforts were found in the response. and the price, quite frankly, is significantly less than I anticipated in this project. I don't want to pitch it, but it was a little less, or a lot less than what I thought would come back. And what he'll do is come back, if there are changes or if there's anything that needs to be done, he'll come back with an estimated price for what it would cost to do that kind of work out there. And it was, I took the RFP directly from Mr. Alvarez's report.
Hey, what's the board's wishes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And come back in now.
Thank you. Commissioners, the next item is...
Mark, if you will, let them get back in.
Quick cup of coffee?
That's not fair.
Thank you, sir.
You didn't bring me none?
I thought you were chewing. Mr. Davis, go ahead.
Thank you. The next item is a request of approval of a performance agreement regarding economic development ad valorem tax exemption for Professional Products, Inc. Just as a way of background, back in December of 2012, the board voted to adopt ordinance number 1239, granting an ad valorem tax exemption to Professional Products for abatement of taxes for improvements made to their facility, and actually a new facility located at 50 Hugh Adams Drive North up in Definiak Springs. The ordinance adopted the application as is. There were no conditions or terms in the ordinance as adopted in 2012, so I prepared the agreement as set forth in the ordinance. The agreement requires reporting to us regarding the number of jobs and the amount of the continuing investment. And so I'm asking you to approve the agreement so we can have these folks start reporting to us as quickly as possible.
Do we know what the tax revenue is per year that they're asking for?
Yes, ma'am. I believe it was.
Because I couldn't find that in any of this information that was on the...
Commissioner, I don't have it with me. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't vote for anything unless unless I know what the amount is and for how long and all that.
I can tell you it was 10, the request was for 10 years, but I could not tell you the exact dollar amount.
Is this, it's on section 2 of the ordinance draft, $38,900.666.
I think that's 38 million. It says on 2, it says total amount of revenue available from tax source is, 39 million.
Investment approximately $2,500,000.
But there's no figure in here. Let's see.
No, Commissioner, in this particular one, it was an expansion of an existing facility, the purchase of a significant amount of personal property, and the purchase and refabrication of a building.
Right, I agree. I understand that, but there's no, what are they asking for? I don't know what they're asking for.
What I was trying to get to is the only tax abatement will be for the value of those improvements. I'm not entirely sure that's been computed yet, but.
Well, I think it's highly unlikely that we can vote for an ordinance if we don't know what it is.
Is the answer in section 3 of the 2012-39, and it says the estimated review loss to the county for the current fiscal year attributable to economic development tax exemption for Professional Products is $4,445.38. That's in section 3 of ordinance 2012-39.
And yes, sir, I think that was the estimate that was made in 2012 that was included in it may be a little more than that, it may be a little less.
For the current fiscal year attributable to an economic development tax exemption is...
And
so
there's
it's
an
4
additional
for improvements, and it's $2,800 for personal property.
Yeah, so it's roughly $7,200, $7,300
per year for 10 years.
Yeah, that's correct. I knew it was in there somewhere.
Mark, have they approached the city of Defuniak for anything?
City has approved it. And
they approved
it. Entered into the same agreement, yes, sir.
So they're going to get the same amount of ad valorem tax rebate from the city of Defuniak?
It probably won't be as much because their rate would not be as much as the county's, would be my guess.
And Mark, was this a commitment that the past commission made? You know, they knew they had dialogue and they had
the ordinance. Yes, when the ordinance was passed in 2012, yes.
Right.
However, the ordinance was passed in 2012. That's the general umbrella ordinance that gives us the ability to make a tax exemption. This is a new proposal that's come forward to us asking for this amount of money under that umbrella thing that was approved in 2012.
Commissioner Meadows?
Yeah.
If I may, at the December 11th, 2012 board meeting, specifically for professional products, the board approved at that time the granting of an economic development ad valorem tax exemption to professional products, and it was 5-0.
I know, I've changed my mind.
Do we have to?
Since all the information I've seen, I've changed my mind. Since people are lining up for these, and I've seen how much money we need in the county for drainage improvements and every other kind of improvement, I don't think we can afford to give any of our tax money away unless we're soliciting these firms and there's heavy competition.
Is 10 years definite, or can we do 5 like we suggested within?
Commissioners, you can put anything you want to in the agreement. I would say that the way I read the ordinance, I didn't draft this ordinance, but the way I read the ordinance was it granted the application as submitted, and it did request 10 years. But you can certainly go to them in the agreement and say 5 years, 7 years, and see what they say.
And that would be my suggestion, like we did before, 5 years, and then we'll take a look at it and see how well they're doing, how much, and may consider another one, but I would say 5 years. Take a look at it.
Is that a motion?
Yes, sir.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further board discussion?
If I didn't feel like there was a prior commitment made, I would not vote for this, but I do feel like, in good faith, that I have to honor the prior commitment, so that's just my comment.
Any public comment? Yes, sir.
Can I ask one question before we do that? It'd be changed to 5 years and then bring it back in 5 years? Is that what I understood, or?
No, they have to do an annual.
Annual. Or they have to do an annual report, but you want to
Yeah, then
redo
bring
it?
it back, if
Okay.
they want to bring it back in 5 years. That was my motion.
I'll take that time. 19 minutes and 56 seconds. Good afternoon. My name is Bob Hudson, Hudson. I am, second time I've spoken to the board about this, and I'm very concerned because it seems like we passed an ordinance that was approved by the voters back years ago. 65%, I think, approved that, which outlined a process by which we could entice businesses to either stay here, expand their business, or attract business here. That was questioned by people in the terms that we didn't have a definitive formula that you went through, and staff, I believe, developed a formula that was there and said, if you're here, here's what you have to do, here's what you get. And the same thing was true for new businesses that come there. It seems that we're down to a discussion about whether it's a new business or whether it's a new industry or whatever it happens to be. My concern is the precedent that we're setting as we sit and do what I call cherry picking issues. If we have issues with the ordinance, if we don't want to do economic incentive to people to either expand their business, create jobs, or if we don't want to entice business, for example, if we had somebody coming here that was potentially bringing 300 jobs, are we going to cherry pick that one and say, well, I've changed my mind? I believe in consistency. I believe that if you put something out there, then if they meet the criteria, I don't understand what the decision process is unless you want to go back, start over again and say, we're going to repeal the ordinance, we're going to put it back on the ballot, let people decide. I am about developing the northern part of this county. I have decided, after being here and talking to you about taxes and all of those other things, and trying to keep those taxes low and to try and develop this area, that one of the ways and the best ways that we can expand this area is to entice people to come here, pay people good living wages. I've lived in 13 different states, And I've seen those states attract businesses in a very competitive way. It's my understanding that we have somebody that we're competing against for a new industry here that's going to write a check to that industry for $5,000 for each one of those 300 jobs. I'm not saying we need to do that, but I'm saying if I were a potential employer, I would say, what are your rules? Or if I was a business coming here, what are the rules? And I expect to be treated just like everybody else. Either redesign the formulas, repeal the ordinance, or let's get about developing businesses and developing jobs in Walton County. I don't care where they are, north, south, east, west, wherever they happen to be. Let's expand the tax base. Let's expand the economy here in Walton County. If it costs $5,000 a year in tax money, where are we going to get it if the business didn't expand? Where are we going to get it if the business didn't come here? Those jobs are worth a lot in a multiplier effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Yes, sir, Mr. Fletcher.
Bill Fletcher, Fletcher. I'm very familiar with the professional products, and as much as I'm against exemptions when they're not needed, I think I'll defer to the counselor, but I don't think you have any choice in this. That ordinance was passed. The referendum that was passed in 2012 gave you all the right to grant those ordinances. That one, there was no criteria established, no basis, no job count to be provided or anything else. I can assure you they were going to buy that facility and renovate it to expand their business with or without an exemption, but that, as Larry likes to say, that horse is out of the barn, so I think you have to give that. And I would strongly urge you to cherry pick when you look at these different businesses that are asking for an exemption. You have to look at each individual one. Why are they asking for it, and what are they bringing to the table? Did you actually go out and entice them to come in? Did anyone go to professional products and say, if you guys will expand, we'll give you a tax exemption? Probably not. They probably knew about the exemption and asked for it, and unfortunately we're prone to just grant it. And I would ask you to counter to my good friend Mr. Hudson, please cherry pick every one of these that comes before you and make the right decision. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Don Riley, R-I-L-E-Y. Like Bill, I hate to differ with my good friend Bob Hudson, but in this particular case, I do. I think that you absolutely have it as an obligation to cherry pick. You don't get the same benefit with each applicant, and with each successful applicant, you get a different benefit, and you should scrutinize each and every one of these. I personally am philosophically opposed to the idea that government is supposed to be engaging in mission creep. And I think that this is indeed mission creep. I'm not going to change the world, and the world's doing this. I don't happen to agree with it, but it's not the only thing I disagree with. Nonetheless, I do think that you should look at each and every one of these and decide, is this worth, in the end, you can talk generically about multipliers, but there is a difference in the benefit that comes with each of these proposals, each of these jobs that are presumptively created. And the question, of course, arises, is this the best and highest use of those funds? If these people are going to come here anyhow, you can look at the infrastructure costs, in particular the recent instances and current instances in Mossy Head. That infrastructure costs someone a whole lot of money, and somebody is going to have to pay for it. The question is, who? And what ultimate benefit is this county and this state and the folks that are paying those bills going to derive from this? There are no free jelly donuts. I don't care what they told me in the halls at the hospital all those years. I had to pay a price. In that case, it was my time to listen to these folks. There are no free jelly donuts in this industrial development stuff either. Y'all need to pay really close attention to not only each individual applicant, but the larger picture. And that larger picture that Bill alluded to is, like him, I don't think that we have as inclusive a set of strictures to govern the disbursement of these funds and most particularly the potential recoupment of these funds. We're going to agree to do something for these people irrespective of what they do for us. If they don't, in fact, measure up to the promises that they've made that were basically an implicit condition, their half of the bargain, they were going to give us, Walton County, Florida, the United States, a benefit in return for the benefit that we unquestionably propose to give to them, and in fact do give to them, then they need to live up to their end of the agreement. And if they don't, they would not be the first people that have scammed us as taxpayers. They may or may not have gone into it with scam on their mind, but you know and I know that that happens. There are good investments, there are bad investments. I forget how many Ys there are in Solyndra, but there's a poster child for scam, bad public investment. We don't want to do that. We need some criteria that say you have an incentive to live up to your end of the bargain and create these jobs. And if you don't, we want our money back. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Riley. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Kelly Jo Kilberg with the Walton Area Chamber, and that's KILBERG. I'm not talking for or against, but just more on the process side of the house, having been involved with this in other locations within Florida. This is more of a performance-based incentive, so they must perform to get the ad valorem rebate. But in addition to that, what might make it easier in the future to make the decision were to have an actual matrix that would show you, are you giving 75% back, 50% back, 25% back, and it can actually reduce over that 10 years or 5 years or 7 years. I think that would help you with the decision that you have to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
It isn't a rebate, correct? It is their tax bill is reduced by a certain amount every year, so they don't pay and get money back. They just don't pay as much tax as they normally would if we didn't. Is that the way it works?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Although there is within the agreement and in the ordinance allow for recoupment. Sometimes that might be difficult to do, but there is in that ordinance and in that statute and in the agreement allows for recoupment for non-performance.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item is a request to re-advertise and hold a public hearing on March 24th, 2015 to essentially reconsider or consider the Empire Truck Tax Exemption Ordinance. I'm sure the Commissioners are aware, the last time the ordinance was considered after advertising, it was a tie vote, a 2-2 vote. Back in May 26th of 2009, the Commission passed procedures for tie votes that basically say, or don't basically say, actually say, whenever action cannot be taken because the vote of the Commissioners has resulted in a tie, the status quo shall continue in effect, and the proposed ordinance, resolution, or motion that produced the tie vote shall be removed from the agenda without prejudice to its reintroduction on a de novo basis at a later time, semicolon, and then it makes an exception or a different rule for land use and quasi-judicial proceedings. So what we're asking is that it be reintroduced or placed back on the agenda after due advertisement on March 24th, 2015.
Is there any time limit on, is it a 6 month? I mean, is there any, I don't see any, but I was just.
Doesn't appear to be, no ma'am. No ma'am.
I'm going to pass the gavel because I'm going to make a motion that we go ahead and hold this new public hearing so that we can break the tie vote and determine one way or the other, yes or no, at that point in time, whether or not we're going to grant that ad valorem tax exemption. That's my motion.
Do we have a second?
Got a second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion among the commissioners? Seeing none. Any public comment? Mr. Fletcher. I'll pass it back to you now.
You take it through the...
Bill Fletcher, it's still Fletcher. I think you all know how I feel about this particular exemption, and I think the other speakers have all made some excellent points here about wanting to bring businesses to this county. We're talking about a non-issue here. Empire is already here. You're not granting them an exemption to entice them to come here. They've got a certain number of jobs that they had put into their business plan when they bought the property at Mossy Head. They had the facility plan. They're going to spend $4 million. They don't need $17,000 a year of our tax money to be a successful business. If they do, they're not a very viable business. I heard you earlier talking about prioritizing where you're going to spend money. We need money for roads and for drainage issues and for a lot of other things. Yet you're willing to throw away what I think could be major amounts of money in the coming years. This one exemption, as a few of you have told me, is not a lot of money. It's only $17,000 a year. If you pass this exemption, I don't know why everybody else in the free enterprise zone wouldn't ask for the same thing. If all you got to do is ask for it, I'm sorry.
I'd like to come. I said, all I'm asking you to do is to bring it back up so that we can have a full board make an up or down vote on it after we have another public hearing.
I understand.
But I would have one request, that when you come to that public hearing, I mean, I saw your letter to the editor that said it's going to cost the county millions of dollars. So if you'll bring back the facts as to how it's costing the county millions of dollars, I'd appreciate that too, so we can put that on the record.
Okay. If you read that letter to the editor, you understood that it says if you grant this and everybody else asks for it and you grant that, it will cost you millions of dollars. That is a fact.
If you'll bring those facts to the table at that time, I'd appreciate it.
I'll be glad to do that. What I'm trying to do, I watch you folks grapple with some really tough issues. We've spent months, Larry Jones and his staff, you folks, me, we've spent a lot of time, our attorney has spent a lot of time on this issue, going back months. And it just bewilders me why you would do this when we're going to gain nothing by granting it, but we're opening the door to cost ourselves a tremendous amount of money. And that's why I'm suggesting vote it down now and go on to more important issues that you all have to deal with and face. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, the only thing I will say is that when the bridges stop falling in and the roads get paved and sediment stops running into the bay, I'll be glad to give away tax money to these new businesses all day long, okay?
All I'm asking you to do is to bring it to a full vote.
I understand what you're doing, Mr. Enfield. I understand it very clearly. I'm just saying that that's my position, is that when those things get done, when people's homes stop flooding, when our bridges stop falling in, when we get our roads paved, when we get the things that are needed desperately by the people in Walton County, then let's talk about giving money away.
They need jobs.
Dr. Riley.
Don Riley, R-I-L-E-Y. A question that came to me, and I should have posed it in a more formal fashion than I did, I suppose, but Mr. Davis is citing rules that govern the conduct of business here, and that it is understood it's in the front of each month's or each meeting's packet. My question is, when and how were these rules adopted? Was it by this particular board or was it by a prior board? And are we operating under valid assumptions? Pretty straightforward question. I think you can see the logical extension of that. If we're not, then I think that all of these actions are certainly open to question, if not in fact challenge. And I would urge that you be sure that the rules that you're under have been properly adopted by this body, not any previous body. in the United States Congress. One Congress may not bind a succeeding Congress. I seriously doubt that this body can bind a successive body nearly 2 years down the line. Thank you.
You're talking about the rules to re-advertise and rehear
The rules that allow reconsideration at this juncture.
Well,
In the event of a tie vote.
If I'm not mistaken, when we first came on the board, Commissioner Meadows and Bill, we were asked by staff if we wanted to adhere to what's already been put in here, what you're referring to in the front of the board book. And absent of that, nobody made, as far as I remember, made a request to change any of the rules that we were presently working on. So we adopted basically to use
But it was
those.
done in a public meeting.
I believe so. I think it was.
I hope so.
Well, I was told, I was
It was at
told
the
that,
first board meeting, I think we said on.
I don't recall.
I was told that I couldn't bring something back up for 6 months when I tried to make a motion that we brought something back up. So, and that was on that roundabout thing.
I think if there was a yes or no vote that came out of it, that's the way to do it, but this was
I think there was.
specifically with a tie vote.
There was
a tie vote?
Is there any more
I don't
public
remember.
discussion?
Call the question.
Seeing none, Mr. Ambellis called the question. All those in favor? Aye.
Nay.
Nay. 3 ayes, 2 nays, the ayes have it.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there's a third tax exemption request, Triangle Chevrolet Buick, the next item. Triangle Chevrolet Buick has requested, and the the property appraiser has approved the application per the ordinance for them to have a tax exemption for their new facility in Definiak Springs to be qualified for a ordinance granting them the tax exemption pursuant to Florida statutes in our referendum. I'd ask the board to advertise and hold a public hearing on March 24, 2015 to consider that tax exemption ordinance. I will tell you that the city of Definiak Springs has approved that particular ordinance. is my
And will you bring
understanding.
back to us at that time, I know they moved from one place to the other, how much it costs to build a building, how many new jobs, where you can bring all that back. I will say, just as a personal note, I have a friend that works at Triangle, and it's amazing. He said since they have moved out on 331, that they are doing just about 4 times the volume they did in town. So we're getting a lot of tax money from selling the cars, apparently,
Well, this is just the purpose of a public hearing on it, because our votes do not have very
And
much,
how
they don't
much-
have any information.
And how much they're asking for.
All that should be in the application, but I'll make sure it's all in the ordinance as well. In fact, Mr. Pilcher's request, we put as much in the ordinance as we possibly can. It helps him a lot.
And I guess proof of what Sarah just said, show us your numbers. Bring us your paperwork.
Well, I'll go ahead and motion to have the public hearing on it, providing we get all the documentation and data
And I'll
at that
second.
meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Commissioners, any other discussion with y'all? Any public comment?
Please don't say
Seeing
so.
none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
4-1.
Commissioners, the next item is our Office of the County Attorney pending litigation status matrix as of end of January 2015. We would ask you to accept the litigation status as of that date and ratify and approve the actions of the County Attorney's Office.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Commissioners, any comment? Public comment? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners. The next item, the last item I have is request to authorize the chair to sign the general release and settlement agreement with Raymond Shaw for and on behalf of Walton County and Florida Association of Counties Trust to settle that pending lawsuit for $12,500.
That is correct. Commissioners, Tim Warner, last name spelled W-A-R-N-E-R, Warner Law Firm, 519 Grace Avenue, Panama City, Florida. On behalf of Walton County, through your self-insurance fund, Florida Association of Counties Trust. As Mr. Davis said, members of the Commission, the case of Raymond Shaw versus Walton County, it's case number 12-611-CA pending in the Circuit Court here in Walton County, involves an incident that occurred on August the 8th, 2007 in the Walton County Jail. We have been engaged in discovery and settlement discussions, and as Mr. Davis indicated, we've reached a tentative settlement agreement for the total amount of $12,500 on this matter. This is funds paid by the Florida Association of Counties Trust on this, subject to your deductible, which you've already met on this matter. So we'd ask the court, the commission's consideration and approval of this settlement agreement general release. Any questions?
Wishes of the board.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioners, any other comment? Any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. We have 4-1.
May I leave this with you,
Yes.
Mr. Davis? I'll take it.
Thank you, Commissioners. That's what I have tonight.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next item is public hearing. Ask you to approve a resolution amending the capital projects fund and the Mossy Head Industrial Park Capital Projects Fund to bring forward land sales revenue at the Mossy Head Industrial Park for the infrastructure cost.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
A motion and a second to open public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we have a public hearing. Anyone wish to comment with regard to the moving of money that came from the sale of the land into the capital projects account to use out there?
I have a question on that. What is the amount of total land sales to date?
1.2 million plus some change. Is that? Yeah, 1.2 million.
And that land sales money is going to be moved into the Mossy Head Industrial Park account and spent on infrastructure cost?
That portion of it, yes, ma'am.
Is that portion of it? I would also like to ask that the $368,627 that was borrowed from the landfill account to start the Mossy Head infrastructure be paid back to that landfill account, which is what we talked about.
I think when we finish with getting all the infrastructure done, that would be the appropriate time to do that, because there may be other costs that still be incurred, and this is our funding source for that, is bringing those monies forward.
Well, you know, once again, you know, I don't agree with that. I think that you could push it out to forever, because I think these costs are going to go on and on and on until we get this finished. So
you don't want to keep going back, putting it in there, and then have to ask for it back out. This at least gives you the source of funds from the sale of the property at the industrial park for use on the infrastructure at the industrial park.
yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying that I think we should have a time limit on when that is to be paid back, and not just string it out until say, well, you know, at some point, because at some point it needs to go back into that landfill account to be allocated for other things. And those other things are primarily what I'm talking about. So,
And I would agree, when the infrastructure is completed, that would be the time to do it.
well, we've gotten $7 million from the state to finish the infrastructure. We've gotten $1.2 million from the property sales. You know, there's been enough money, I think, spent on that we can pay back that fund and then go from there. If we have to wait on further land sales to finish the infrastructure, I think that's what we do.
Well, I would disagree. Ms. Thomason?
Yes, Mr. Enfield. With the land sales that we've had so far and factoring in the estimated cost of infrastructure over what the state we anticipate the state to fund, we currently have an $885,754 that the state money will not fund. When we take that against what is remaining in that account, there would be about $140,000 left. So if the board wishes to repay any part of that now, there is not sufficient funding to cover both the anticipated costs at this point and paying back the landfill.
But when the infrastructure is completed, we would expect that money that was borrowed from the landfill account to go back to it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What's the wishes of the board? We need to close the public hearing first?
Yes,
Okay.
we need to vote outside the public.
Anyone else? Okay.
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now the wishes of the board.
Motion to do whatever we're asking to do here.
This is bringing money forward
To move money forward.
from the sales. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion by the board? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Commissioner Meadows.
Two things I have here is, first of all, is the proportionate fair share funds. I would like to see the board adopt some standards on use of that proportionate fair share funding, more definitive than this two-page general requirements that we have that I guess came from the code. And primarily what I'm talking about is right now we have the ability, we give the developer the ability to pay into a fund. Those funds have been used all over the place with no justification and no verification that that fund actually helped mitigate the impacts of that particular project. So I would like to see this followed more closely. In other words, we need a capital improvements plan, because if you're going to load up 30A and there is no way to improve the capacity on 30A, then I don't think the prop share fund is viable for that particular use. So I would like to see the prop share funding. I would like for us to adopt some rules. In other words, you can't use a prop share fund in Miramar for something in Inlet Beach, which has happened before. You can't use a prop share account to fix a bridge on 30A when it was supposed to go to mitigate the traffic on a particular project way down East 30A. So I think that these funds are being misused. I think that and they're also being collected from these developments, that there is no way that some of these roads can accept additional capacity under the current infrastructure CIP that we have or don't have. I don't even think we have a CIP, but so I would ask that Mr. Davis bring back some language on that.
Mr. Davis?
Yes, ma'am, and I'll be happy to do that. I've already, in seeing this, started talking to Tim Whaler with the planning department. Has a significant amount of expertise in proportionate fair share. We began to look at it a few months back on another issue that came up at Inlet Beach, and what we'd like to do is actually not only bring back standards, but probably bring back a brand new ordinance. The statute has also changed, and Commissioner Meadows is correct. The purpose of the proportionate fair share is to fund capital improvement projects for the deficient transportation needs in that particular area that's deficient, that's affected by that particular project. And then there's some exceptions down the road, and I think her idea of tightening up the language is well taken, and Tim and I will certainly get on that. Be happy to do it.
Thank you.
Was that a motion?
No, I think it's just direction to staff.
Well, it's just direction to staff.
I would think we would all agree with that. Well, I won't speak for the rest of the commissioners, but I think that it's a sound advice to, let's take a look at that.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you don't have a project that's going to increase the capacity, how can you collect money and keep it in an account and say, oh, we're all good? Anyway, the second thing I have is to request planning during this upcoming ERA process to include the establishment of zoning classifications as part of the ERA and give us options on how to implement zoning.
Amen.
So I got an amen. I got an amen on that.
And
So
the back
I
is
would-
pew.
Mr. Jones, that comes under you.
So that's,
Handle that.
that's, I don't know if I need to make a motion, but I would like to see us establish zoning. I think that will
Yes,
help us tremendously on some of the issues that we're grappling with.
for Mr. Mayor.
You have to give concurrence of the board to
Okay.
go that direction.
And I would like to make one comment, because I certainly agree with that, and that discussion has gone on for a period of time, but those of us that sat here during the last ear amendment, everything that came before us, somebody said, well, put it in the ear amendment. You know, we'll do that in the ear amendment.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to caution, well, let's not get the ear amendment beyond what, and I think that's right, where these type of things is where it's supposed to be, and these are things we're supposed to do in it. But it turned into a catch-all. So, you know, let's protect the integrity of it, do the things we need to do through it. But these are the kind of things that need to be addressed in it. So,
Okay. Commissioner Meadows, anything else?
That's all.
Commissioner Commander.
Yes, I would like permission from the board to use $10,000 of my recreational plat fee money to help with some much-needed infrastructure with the Little League Park in Funiac. It can only be spent on infrastructure. Their buildings are falling down, their bathrooms are falling apart. And at such time that we decide where we're going to put the practice fields in Miramar, we thought we had a place, and unfortunately, I think it's going to cost us more money than, you know, but
Yeah.
once we have a definite place in Miramar for those practice fields, I'll come back to you and ask that I also donate $10,000 of my recreational plat fee to that as well.
You have plat fees?
Well, what, you hadn't stolen from me, yeah. You know.
Ken Bridget didn't know she had any, did he?
Yeah, Ken didn't know it, yeah.
Mr. Davis, since this is not a current agenda item, does this,
Since it's moving money,
we'll put it on the next
Okay,
agenda
put
for
it on the
vote.
next agenda if
Okay.
you would, please. Thank you.
And we did meet with the consultants today on the sports park, and it looks like that's going to be a timely process. So.
The sports park, but not the practice field.
Right,
thing.
exactly, but
Yeah.
part of that may be incorporated into it, but
Okay.
just
Okay, so if you will put that on the next agenda, I would appreciate it.
Commissioner Jones.
Nothing.
Commissioner Chapman.
Question for staff. The city of Definiak, I believe, is taking some action concerning moving the rec park out at Gene Hurley to possibly go to We Care Park. Do we have any idea where we're at on that? Are we planning to do that, or?
yeah, the We Care is probably not a feasible option for a number of reasons. We're actually looking at a piece of property that the county owns out across from Commissioner Enfield's office, which is about 4 miles out of town, but it's probably the only reasonable option we have. Chance has began laying out a very preliminary design of what would fit on that property, how well it would fit. A lot of work to be done, but we are in communication with the city about what our understanding that the Gene Hurley was built with a FERDAP grant. There's certain things they have to do in order to unbuild it, and we want to make sure that they do go about that properly, and so that we don't get in the middle of something. But we're actually working with the city and trying to address it as a city initiative that we're assisting with, simply because it was a FERDAP grant they got. It is their facility, and we certainly want to work with them the best we can to relocate it if that's possible.
This might be for Mark. The property located behind Maud Saunders, which I think at one time was dedicated to the city for whatever, but I think they said the school board requested it back.
Not that I'm aware of. There was the school board deeded the property to the city with a reverter clause. If there wasn't construction or plans for construction with a certain period of time, the property would revert back. I wasn't aware that the school board, and I'm putting on my school board hat here, had actually requested the reverter clause to be
Well, it might have
implemented.
been misstated, but anyway.
Yeah, and I've heard that this morning for the first time on the news.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Would
and to be blunt with you, the school district, that property, it goes like this, and the cost of construction or new construction on there would be fairly significant. We were pretty certain we would never use it. And that's why we deeded it to the city.
Is the land capable of knocking down some hills, filling in some valleys, and have a tier system, maybe to some additional fields or something back in there?
I don't, my personal opinion, I'm certainly no engineer. The cost of that would be outrageous.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's all I have.
Can I tag on him for just a minute, because he brought up the city of Defuniak. We were gonna bring back all the contracts with the city, and I know Gene Hurley, we haven't brought all the contracts back yet.
You're correct. We're in the process of working the language
Okay.
that we are comfortable with and the city's comfortable with to bring back.
No.
Okay.
For the,
Oh, you said Gene Hurley. I'm sorry. I thought you meant the contract. We did away with it, yeah.
no.
No, yeah,
Gene
I mean,
Hurley.
well, all the contracts for the city, because we want to make sure that we get equal,
That's correct.
eggs in the basket here,
Anything else?
No, sir, I'm
Okay,
good.
I have nothing. Any additional public comment? Seeing none, we're in recess until 5:45.
Commissioners, I felt at the opening of the consent agenda items, the workshop on the outdoor events ordinance is not a commission workshop, it's a staff workshop, staff public workshop. I just want to make sure that was clear for the record. It is not a commission workshop.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Dice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first item on the Planning and Development Services agenda is the EAR process. We're just asking authorization from the board to move forward with that process, and we'll get that moving, getting data and so forth. And also, based on the previous item from Commissioner Meadows, we'll also have that involved in it too, as far as the zoning discussion.
And we know how difficult that's going to be. I mean,
Yes, ma'am.
I have been told since 2006, it's just a monumental task, but you start taking a bite one at a time. I
Right.
mean, I think our citizens' things will be so much clearer.
Yes, ma'am. What we can do is just lay out what we believe is the best avenue to achieve that, and then, obviously there'll be some tough decisions and a long road ahead with that go, but we'll definitely be glad to give you our best recommendation as far as how to achieve that particular goal.
Okay.
We need a motion? Yeah. So moved.
Second. Motion is second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next two items are legislative items, the first being the Grayton Beach Neighborhood Plan Overlay District Ordinance. This is the final hearing. If I can, I'll ask Staff Member Vivian Chamel to come and give a brief view on the project.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is an adoption hearing for the Grayton Beach Neighborhood Plan, and if you would, go to Exhibit B in your book, which is the plan, and we have incorporated strike through and underline with the Planning Commission recommendations and and suggestions from the last Board of County Commissioners meeting. And there really aren't very many changes, and the Grayton Beach Neighborhood Planning Group does agree with all of the changes that have been documented here. So
They do agree.
They do agree. The first change is on page 3 of the plan, in 8.0, and use mix for commercial and workplace by size and location. The second changes are on page 4, where we added under 12.2, new commercial parking or new commercial purposes as of the adopted date of this ordinance. We changed or added to the 14.0 neighborhood commercial parking requirements. We added the land use category to make it clear that we're only talking about properties that are neighborhood commercial land use category, not just neighborhood commercial as a business. Let's see. And then we go to page 6, and we incorporated just a couple of items regarding the signs. And page 7 was where the Planning Commission recommended the verbiage regarding not affecting number of permits available to the general public for the driving on the beach permits. Those have been the recommended changes. Also in the minutes, the draft minutes from the last board meeting, which is under Exhibit J, I did highlight comments that were made during the meeting And if you can find that page, we have basically discussed and taken care of all of the things that the commissioners had questions or suggestions on. And basically, there is one thing that we wanted to do. I know we met with Commissioner Meadows and with legal staff being Sydney, and there was one item in the plan that is highlighted in here where Commissioner Meadows questioned the streets and infrastructure section, and that is basically back on page 3 of your plan. We just wanted to add where it says that the neighborhood shall be notified of any decisions concerning infrastructure, development, or changes, including paving, resurfacing of roads, and trimming of trees, alterations of alleys, and cutting of vegetation. We just would like to say, unless in the case of an emergency, just in case there is a hurricane or some kind of event. And so those are basically the changes that we have. Billy Bezette was going to present to you information on the draft, the parking, beach driving permits. Unless you have any questions for me on the rest of the plan.
I'm sorry, is Billy going to address, we asked you last time how many current property owners in Grayton possess driving permits?
Yes, that's what Billy is going to address. That information got from the Clerk of Courts on grandfathered driving permits, and Billy took it to determine how many there are. So
Commissioner Meadows, go ahead.
Just good job on Vivian on incorporating, all of those different comments back into here to the ordinance. I think good job.
Okay.
Mr. Bezette.
Commissioners, good evening. Billy Bezette, B-U-Z-Z-E-T-T, and I'm here with the Grayton Beach Neighborhood Association. I would like to echo Commissioner Meadows' comments. I really appreciate staff's hard work. We worked with them for almost 2 years on this neighborhood plan, and I know that Ms. Shamel has spent a lot of time helping us perfect it to the point where I think it's a very good product and one that we're all proud of. So I really want to commend her and appreciate, again, that help. Specific on the issue of the driving the permits, I was asked to come back with an assessment of what those permits are and then a recommendation, and I'm prepared to do that. We were able to get through the clerk's office a list of all of the permit holders today. For reasons I'm not quite sure of, they redacted or they blocked out all of the addresses, and in some cases it was a little bit hard to figure it out. But
I can address that,
okay,
because we couldn't determine what may have been law enforcement officers and what not, and there are certain classes that are protected,
okay,
so we chose to not give out any of those.
So I had to put on my detective hat too and try to figure it out, but I think I have. Don't hold me totally to the numbers, but I'll tell you this: when you back out all of the public property, so Walton County owns property, the state of Florida owns property, and then you back out all the commercial property, because again, our plan is tailored towards residential property. There's about 300 lots, and of those 300, about half or maybe just a little bit less actually have permits. And of the balance that don't have permits, I would say that half of that property is owned by people in Grayton Beach that already have permits. So I don't mean to be overly complicated by that, but if you were to take that half and half it again, it's probably around 70 folks wouldn't have permits. I know that's not science, and so what I have surveyed our folks and come with a fixed number, and what we're asking for is a number of 50, not more than that. And that's what we'd be asking for.
Okay.
50 available to Grayton Beach property owners.
Okay. Right.
Additional, right?
To the residential.
Yes, that's correct.
Additional to the ones
yes,
that are
ma'am.
already.
But we did our best to be as specific as we can, and we wanted to do just that.
Billy, who's going to determine who gets those 50? If you got 70, maybe 75.
Well, what I was going to ask you is if we could agree that the number 50 was the right number. We'd like to, our neighborhood, work with the county on the process for doing that. I think the worst case would be a first come, first serve. I think it ought to be, we've heard criticisms that this was maybe an attempt to make property in Grayton more marketable than other places, that renters were going to use it. We want to make sure that that's a non-issue, that it would be the person that got the permit or their immediate family would be using it, and that'd be it, not commercial. And one of the things I would put out there is of these 50, it'd be folks who don't have a permit. For example, I have a permit. This is for people who have had property in Grayton who want to have that permit. I don't deserve two. They surely deserve one. I can't represent exactly what all the rules would be, but with your permission, I'd like to work with the county, with Mr. Davis, and come up with what we think would be a reasonable approach on that.
Let me, if I may, you have an ordinance that deals with driving on the beach. Regardless of what you do here, that ordinance, if you choose to grant any consideration for Grayton's request, is going to have to be dealt with through that ordinance. I would suggest that, based on what Mr. Bissett has said, and we appreciate it, that if you're inclined to offer any expansion of that it be done within the beach driving ordinance, and that we look at the things that he's just mentioned about. In fact, we've had some conversation with each of you, I believe, of how we identify that individual as opposed to a property or vehicle. Mm-hmm. So there's some means and methods that we've already began looking at how we can do some of the things he's spoken of. But I would suggest that if you want to give that consideration, that I think it would be cleaner if we did it through the beach driving ordinances and made those provisions available through it, and the changes that would need to be made to accommodate any consideration for this request of the expansion for the Grayton Beach owners be done through that ordinance and through an amendment of it.
And not through the neighborhood plan.
I think it would be better in the ordinance. I think if you recognized it in the plan that it may be addressed in the ordinance, okay. But I think the governing document, or correct me if I'm wrong, will be the ordinance that dictates how driving on the beach is done, who gets to do it.
That's correct. It'll be chapter.
Well, if we're going to go through that process of using the ordinance to address what Billy's talked about, I think in some of my conversations with him and others, we've got to be able to monitor and control those permits instead of, because I've heard of them being put on the side of a refrigerator and whoever rents it gets it and goes down there and does whatever. So we might look at, I think you and I discussed, a placard system that would be used, and the person that's issued to, or that family is issued to, is something, they got to be in that vehicle when it's on the beach.
Right.
Because, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can approve this in here, but if we don't correct the ordinance and approve it, then this is no good. The ordinance has to be changed rather than it being incorporated in here. So, I mean, I think you've done a wonderful job on the neighborhood plan. I think, I'm ready to pass it tonight and then bring back up the driving on the beach, for us to take a look at, because we can't, what we do here, if we don't change the ordinance, then this means nothing,
Okay, I mean,
Yeah,
I'm going to defer to however you all want to do it. I would suggest that there are many topics that are in here that are in other ordinances also that you're still doing it by plan. But if your preference is to do it that way, then I'll defer to you all.
I would like to say, I think that, talking about changing people's minds and such.
Not you, no.
Yeah, I've changed my mind on this one as well. I think that we ought to go with the 50 in the neighborhood plan. That way we don't have to open up the beach driving ordinance, which, as everybody knows, is it's extreme. Well, yeah, it's just anyway, you know what I mean. I'm not going to use any words on that, but I think we ought to do the 50, and then that way they can kind of figure out which property owners missed the grandfathering window, which ones, among themselves. Adopt the neighborhood plan as it is, but just add in there that, that the neighborhood, the residential properties would get 50 additional driving permits, and it would not affect the lottery. And then if we want to look at the ordinance, we always could. We could expand the lottery, I think, or change some of that. But I think that it could be embedded in the neighborhood plan.
Well, it'll take some creative drafting, but I think Billy and I can, and the staff can put together with Vivian something that says, and I don't want to say it out loud because I'm doing it off the top of my head, but something that essentially says that parking or driving on the beach at Grayton Beach is governed by Chapter 20, subject to the following exceptions or something along those lines.
And then their neighborhood association could figure out who gets those 50, I guess. I mean, something to that effect.
When you started out, you mentioned those that missed the grandfathering thing. Would this just pertain to those who missed the grandfathering?
No,
or anybody that is
it would
subsequently bought?
include those. You know, it could include anybody that they wanted to do it. But there were a handful of people who said, well, you know, we missed that window because we weren't in town. We lived somewhere else. We had a tragedy in the family, et cetera. We had some things that we were dealing with. So that would be, you know, they would be eligible for those as well because they have residences in Grayton Beach.
And Billy's correct. There are other provisions. Vending is one of them, for instance, that a little bit different than what are in the current ordinance. But
and their parking is different.
Their parking is a little different. So we might just want to add. It's subject to the current ordinance, except as provided herein, or something along that way, so we don't have folks being confused by the neighborhood plan.
Right. That's be more than acceptable.
You're saying these folks are going to determine who the 50 are?
Well, we're going to work with the county to make sure there's a criteria. We're not, I don't think that's my obligation.
What I would suggest is adopt the plan tentatively with the 50 number, then direct staff to work with Billy to come up with a method and means of determining how those 50 are distributed.
Billy, as far as those 50,
yes, sir.
You couldn't have somebody such as yourself who's already got one that could ask for another one.
That would be my suggestion, that should not happen.
No.
That, you know,
If you got one,
I shouldn't be somebody who's greedy trying to go out, run out and get a permit. That's not what
could
this
it be
is
made
about.
part of any changes that we'd
Can we
like
say
to
that
make?
in here?
Yeah, we can put that in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, these are precious few things.
Shall not be greedy.
Would we want to consider age? You know, I'm back to the 65. I think anybody 65 should, if they want a permit to go down there, I think they should have one. I'm not there yet.
So that would be one of the first criteria would be age 65 and older?
Well, I mean,
if you're setting criteria?
Someone make an argument earlier of
Well,
61.
I think if you,
You don't live in Grayton Beach, it doesn't work.
I think if you open up the ordinance, that you could change it to say that, you know, senior citizens 61 and over would be eligible for, would get a permit, because
Let's just bring that.
I mean, I would agree to that too, but I don't think we put it in here.
Yeah, and
Because that would just be 61 and over for Grayton Beach.
Well,
Right.
And there's nobody that old over there.
No, not yet. We hope to get there.
but I would suggest that in any event, if we decide to open the ordinance up, that we do it on a very limited basis, and that we know what we want to deal with through the process, and not make it just wide open fair game. So if it's to deal with senior citizens, and that's the way we'd advertise it, and that's all we deal with.
Yeah.
So we have a way to get there.
Well, you and I were discussing the last time we were down here, I rode with Mr. Jones, and we kind of brainstormed on the way back. How can we keep, you know, one parcel, one household from having, you know, 2 or 3 permits, you know, because that kind of robs other people that want them. And he had some, I hate to give him credit, but he did have some really good ideas.
They were your ideas, Commissioner.
You know.
They were all her ideas, I promise you.
About having a picture ID. This person, and I'm way over 61, has this permit. And if my vehicle's down there, this face better be on that beach.
Yeah.
Rather than letting, you know, as you say, renters and everybody else use it. I think that will be a little more cumbersome for our staff to do those, and that way you have a kind of like a badge. She's wearing a badge tonight, rather than a decal that you stick in the corner and everybody can tear it off and put it, you know. So I mean, those are some things we need to vet and talk about, you know?
See, I think it's the total number of cars, not really the people. So if your renter wants to drive that car down there, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah,
I
would tell you that, yeah.
Or if you don't want that, or if if your son, his picture may not be on the thing, but you may not want to be in the car and drive down. It makes it more cumbersome, in my opinion. But I think we ought to tattoo people, and then
That works, yeah.
Well, I can just tell you the community of Grayton very much appreciates your consideration of our entire plan, and I hope that with the amendment by Commissioner Meadows, you will consider approving the plan, and we look forward to implementing it. So, I again thank you very much for your opportunity to be here.
Thank you. Do we have other?
Billy, can I? Excuse me. Can I just we reschedule the or continue the public hearing to the next meeting? We'll have the draft language for the 50 for them to approve, or do you want to approve it?
Well, I was hoping maybe we
I don't
could
want
get
to approve it without language.
Well, can we approve it with concept that would just say that?
That's fine.
What I was wondering is on this section 20 on page 7, just say not to exceed 50 permits. See the section 20.2. This, we could write something that with the effect that would say this section allows not more than 50 additional permits, and then allow maybe you and I to in that way, because I think that if you all agree on the numbers 50, then we can massage the sentence.
Billy, let me get some other public comment. Dr. Riley?
Yes, sir.
I really think it should be brought back to us.
Don Riley. I've gotten so old during the course of this meeting, I'm not sure I remember how my name is spelled. I think Riley. The discussion on this to this moment has been apparently predicated upon the moral legitimacy of what has been proposed. I would beg to differ. The folks at Grayton Beach are well-meaning. I'm not nearly as familiar with all of the elements of the plan as Commissioner Meadows and others or Mr. Mazzette. Nonetheless, it seems to me that one of the predicates of our system of government, and forgive me if I seem to be pedantic in lecture, but I think a little of that is in order here, is equal treatment under the law. I am not at all convinced that there is any legitimacy to the argument that people in Grayton Beach should be singled out for special treatment because of their ownership of property that is near a beach that is public property or any other public property appurtenance. There is a small number, or there are a small number of permits that are available via lottery to the public. There are those who are grandfathered in already, and this proposes to add this further guarantee to folks who own property there. I don't believe that that is a legitimate proposal morally. I think it is reprehensible. Why should I not, since I live close to a public beach in Miramar, not have some special dispensation there? You know, there are crowds going by on 98, on Scenic 98. It's a public road. Why should I, a resident sitting on that road, not have special privileges? I can't think of any reason why I should, any more than anybody else. They're public property. I don't think it's a good idea for this body to be picking winners and losers, and I would beg to differ with something Mr. Mazzette said. This would, in fact, almost without question, in fact, enhance the value of those properties down there. Let's divide that into two different markets. One, a rental market. If you can't use these, okay, I'll agree with that. It wouldn't enhance it. On the other hand, that is not the only market. There's a market for purchase of these properties, and that will preferentially enhance the value of those to the detriment of other areas in the county on the beach. I ask you, why should you be giving them, me, or anyone else such special privileges for a limited resource? There's only a finite number of these. Y'all want to keep that number down, understandably so. there is no moral claim that I think is sustainable for any preferential treatment whatsoever for any single citizen of this county when it comes to that public beach. And I would ask that as you consider this between now and the time that it is brought up for a vote, that neither they, nor I, nor any other citizen should be so singled out for advantageous preferential treatment at the expense of the other citizens of this county. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
My name's Mary Nielsen, Nielson. I believe that the Section 20 permitted vehicles on the beach on page 7 should be removed from this document in its entirety. I believe that Ms. Commander and Mr. Jones's idea about addressing this as far as Grayton Beach goes, or any other citizen from any place in this county, it all should be in the driving on the beach ordinance. That should be the one commanding document that you and future boards have jurisdiction over. When you put a paragraph in this document that's a neighborhood plan, the neighborhood has to vote to change or amend this document. It inserts this language, and whatever you choose to put in here, or you agree to that they want to put in here, they have to choose to amend it, not you. They choose to amend it. So this is not a topic that really should be in there. It should be in the driving on the beach ordinance in its entirety, whether it affects them, affects me, affects somebody else in Scenic Gulf Drive, or whoever it affects. That should be the one commanding, comprehensive document that governs all of our rights, no matter whether you live in Paxton or you live right down on the Gulf. So I think item 20, permitted vehicles on the beach, should be totally removed, and I think your idea is fabulous. Go do and work on the driving on the beach. My second comment is actually a question. What has the state of Florida, Fish and Wildlife, or any other governing agency, as far as the use of that state land, have to say about this request? Because I believe when I sat through those original hearings, when this all came up years ago, that the goal was to minimize or to reduce and contain in some fashion the degree of driving on that beach, because part of the goal was conservation. Well, this is adding 50 slots, 50 permits, whatever you want to call it. But that all should be contained in driving on the beach. And I would love to see a letter, pro or con, from the state as to, have they been notified of this? Are they aware of it? What are their comments? I didn't see anything in the package. I went through the package and I read this. Now that's permitted vehicles on the beach. I concur with Dr. Riley 100%. Now going back to page 5 under vending, that's another issue. I think all vending, whether it's on the state property at Grayton Beach or some other beach, whether it's your beach, county beach, state beach, or whoever, vending number 16. Those 16 and 20 are the two that the staff advised are not compliant. Okay? I think vending should be removed as well. And if you're going to put vending in, it should refer to your county ordinances. Times change, issues change, needs change, your needs, the citizens' needs, Grayton's needs change. Population bases change. What people do and how they vend and what they vend and everything will change. We've seen it change in the last 2 years along these beaches. It's going to be different 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Vending should be pulled out as well. We have vending ordinances, and that should be a comprehensive ordinance that encompasses everyone and all the needs, and the vendors should all be treated equally. There should be no segregation, and in the language in 16.1 where it incorporates the current ordinances but maybe excludes them for future ordinances. Why should a vendor down here be subject to a future ordinance or change in the vending ordinance and Grayton Beach be excluded? This is another exclusionary thing, and it's also a paragraph that really doesn't need to be in a neighborhood plan. It should be governed by you and the future commissioners. And it should not be subject to them requesting a change because they're locked in. They want it this way. They wouldn't have put it in there to begin with if they didn't want it this way, and it's not going to be easy to undo it. So I suggest you remove 16 and 20 in its entirety and go with the idea that Larry and Sarah have, and to look at these by themselves, encompassing county-wide. Fairness to all. Whether you're a vendor, you're a guest, you're an owner, whatever you are. And maybe we can come up into a solution that will help them to some degree. I don't know. But I think that needs to be in an open workshop, public hearings for public ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nielsen. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Betty Letcher, Letcher. Okay, I live at Inlet Beach, but first let me say, I was at that meeting, I don't remember how many years ago, when it was getting overdone with beach driving. And that's when y'all set the lottery, and people that were grandfathered in, if they got in within a couple of days, they got to be grandfathered in. And also at Inlet Beach, we have a drive down for boat launch, and what would make us different to come back and ask y'all the same thing for our plan, because there's people in our neighborhood that would like to have the same opportunity. And like if you live at Grayton Beach or at Inlet Beach, you can walk to the beach. Think about the people that live a long way off and they have to drive down. And I just think that it's not right to a certain section like that they should be treated differently. And I agree that should stay the ordinance that it is, because y'all worked on it. And that means you're going to add 50 more to the whatever you have every year. And then there you go again, it'll be complaints. So I appreciate it. But if you do, then I'm going to come back and ask for our neighborhood plan to add to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Letcher. Anyone else?
Commissioners, let me point out, and I frankly just noticed it tonight, that there is, in terms of the vending portion of it, unless I'm mistaken, it adopts the current vending ordinance, but it does make one additional requirement for vending on lands owned by the state, which obviously is most of the beach, as I understand it, and that is an annual written authorization from the state of Florida. I don't know that that's required now. Somebody may correct me if I'm wrong about that, but I just want to make sure you knew that's an additional.
We have to get the states down at Deer Lake State Park. The state gave a written authorization for vendors to vend on Deer Lake State Park. So
I just didn't know. I don't remember that being in the vending ordinance part of it.
Probably not, but it's something I discovered in the course of people complaining about the vendors. So we called the state, and the state said, yes, we did give them permission to vend on Deer Lake State Park.
Okay.
Evidently, it's been done.
Ms. Shamel, I have a question. Were any of the state agencies contacted about this?
No, they were not. We did review the beach management plan that is the lease that Walton County has with the state of Florida regarding the driving on the beach. Well, the entire beach activities ordinance is included in that beach management plan.
One thing is that the state property is included in this plan, and were sent votes. We sent out letters to vote or not vote, and they never returned them. It's based on what I've heard, but they never returned them. So they were notified that this was a neighborhood plan that was going into action, and that it affected their property, and they didn't respond.
Mr. Bissett.
That's my understanding.
On that specific topic, you're correct. You know, our neighborhood plan has public property. Walton County was notified with a series of certified return receipt letters, as was the state of Florida. Particular to the state of Florida, though, I had DEP actually call me up, wanted to let me know they got it. And they also let me know they just felt like they weren't going to vote. They don't have to vote, so they decided they didn't vote. But they're on notice. I have the signed cards. They received them like every property owner. And they were on notice. I wouldn't speak for them, but I want you to know that. And if it's appropriate, I'd like to just respond on a couple of comments that were made to make sure that...
Briefly.
Very briefly. The whole idea of a neighborhood plan is to tailor what we have normally, the very general, what applies to everybody in the county, to more narrow to a specific needs of a specific area. That's why you have 4 or 5 already neighborhood plans. Everything that's in this neighborhood plan is in an ordinance already. Parking, setbacks, noise, alcohol, every one of those things. By definition, we tailored stuff particular to Grayton, and that's why it's in here. Otherwise, we wouldn't have done a neighborhood plan. So I wanted to make sure that anybody in the audience who thought otherwise, that's why you have a plan. And that's the reason we did it. And specific to vending, I just want to say there's nothing in there about vending except the first 3 sections in there are republishing what the law is today, and the 4th section just is a statement of fact that the state of Florida has a lease with Walton County, and within the body of that lease, it allows people to commercial fish on that beach. That's all it says. It's not changing anything. It's just an acknowledgement. And when we started the whole process, one of the things that was recommended to us is to have a comprehensive document that you can see what are the things that apply to Grayton that are different than everybody else. All over South Walton, you got 50-foot height limit. Grayton's 40. Things like that. Grayton had a noise ordinance before the county had a noise ordinance. And this is a kind of a one-stop place to be able to get that. Again, I'm very proud of the plan that we have, and I would hope that you all would consider approving it. I will tell you, just to not monopolize time, we do have a lot of people from Grayton, and they've asked me to be the one to come up here and speak. And I assume if I'm not doing a good job, they'll come up here and tell you. But we would appreciate your consideration of the plan as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bissett. What's wishes of the board?
Well, my motion would be to accept the neighborhood plan, approve it, with the addition that Section 20 read not to exceed 50 permits.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. It's open for discussion.
Well, I hate to disagree with Billy Bissett more. I'd rather cut off my nose because I respect him so terribly much, but I don't think that the vehicles on the beach, that this is where we should address it. I think we should address it in an ordinance and put it in the ordinance and clean it up because, you know, Ms. Nielsen is right. Once it's in here, then the Grayton Beach folks are going to have to amend it. We cannot, and I think it's a very important that driving on the beach is so important that I think it should come back to the commission, whether, you know, I'm here or 10 years down the road, it should come back to commissioners to look at because, you know, heaven only knows what's going to change in the years to come, you know. So, I mean, I accept the plan and fully agree with it. I just feel like we should take 20 out and address it in our ordinance. That's my only thing.
Yeah, I'm concerned also about the one, I hadn't really thought about it, was the vending ordinance that would supersede all of the stuff, even though it's just a minor deviation there. I think that Administrator Jones's idea that we address this through the driving on the beach ordinance would be the appropriate place to address that as opposed to specifically within the neighborhood ordinance. But we'll see where that goes. Other than that, I think staff and Mr. Bissett put a lot of time and effort in putting this together, and it's a comprehensive plan, but there's just a couple issues outstanding for me.
And I'm not saying that we're not going to agree on it and it's going to pass, but I just think there's the better avenue for this is in the ordinance.
Any further discussion?
Well, my feeling is, I agree with Ms. Nielsen to a point, that if we start identifying specific areas and giving special consideration to those areas, the fairness is not there for anybody else in the county. I understand Billy did a lot of work on this thing. Staff did a lot of work on it. It's a pretty good document, in my opinion. I just also agree with Commissioner Commander in that it's probably best addressed with the ordinance in lieu of the neighborhood plan.
Okay, we have a motion and a second pertaining to adopting as written with the inclusion of up to 50 additional parking permits to be issued on this thing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion fails.
I'd like to make a subsequent motion, if it's appropriate, Mr. Attorney Person, that we adopt the plan excluding 20 permitted vehicles on the beach, and that we address that in a future public hearing on vehicles on the beach.
Make your motion.
Excluding section 20, is that?
Excluding
Okay.
section 20, yes, sir.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioners?
Could we say prior to the season? So much what happens is we say we're going to do it, and then 6 months later, what I'm saying is sooner than later.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a problem with that.
I just said, I don't think that could be done this year, because you've got to advertise, then you've got to have two public hearings, then you have to, and we're already almost.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I thought, is section 20 in the Land Development Code? I don't think it is.
Section,
So we just say
no, item 20 is, but my question would be, you're going to open up the beach activity ordinance, but how are you going to address their request in that ordinance? How is that going to, how's that going to address? See, I guess I don't understand. Are you going to suggest that we up the lottery so more people can get in, or what would be the purpose of opening that ordinance back up?
Don't we have a specific number of names?
Yes.
Could we open it up to include 50 additional permits for property owners in Great Beach? I mean,
Could you do that if you know?
I will certainly take a shot at drafting, yes, ma'am.
But see, I don't.
But that's what they're asking us to do here, and we would still have to amend the ordinance to make it legal.
No, not really. I don't think you would. I think the neighborhood plan, the way it's set up, is set up so that each neighborhood can, like you said, determine its own future. So if they wanted to amend it, they can amend the neighborhood plan. They just have to come back to us. So I think putting it in the big ordinance is going to be very controversial.
Any other comment? Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor to adopt, excluding section 20, the proposed neighborhood plan for Grayton Beach.
And to bring, and in my motions, to bring back the riding on the beach ordinance as soon as we can get it on the agenda.
Was that your second?
Amend my second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next item.
Just to be clear, we're to work with Mr. Bezette in the neighborhood to draft some appropriate language to cover those 50 for
Yeah, could it be
Grayton
brought
Beach.
back to us at the next meeting, or, so, because there is a,
Well, you're going to have a separate hearing.
yeah.
We've got to get them to know what we're sitting in public hearing. How long does it take?
Are you? Mr. Dice?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the last item on our agenda for legislative items is the recreational plat fee amendment ordinance. This is the final hearing, the adoption hearing for this. As you may recall, we have moved the rec plat fee from 5% of the gross value to 6%. This is just a final adoption of that.
Do we have to open it up for public hearing?
Does it need a public?
I know is this the adoption hearing?
Adoption hearing, yes.
Yeah, we will need to open it.
Okay. You have a motion to open the hearing?
Motion to open the hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next two items are quasi-judicial.
No, we're doing the public hearing
sorry.
on the plat fee. Okay, you're presenting that you're following what was instructed previously of raising this from 5% to 6%.
That's right.
Okay.
Correct.
Is there any public comment?
Motion to,
Seeing none.
motion to close public hearing?
Motion to close public hearing.
Motion to approve.
Okay, first we have to vote to close the hearing. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Now you have a motion, Commissioner?
Motion to,
Approve, adopt? And that's a second? All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, the next two items are quasi-judicial, need to be sworn in.
Anyone who anticipates testifying before the board on either of the quasi-judicial matters before the board, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you would give before this board will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. If you would, when you come to the board, state your name, spell your last name. Commissioners, have any of you had any ex parte contacts regarding any item on the quasi-judicial docket tonight?
Hang on a minute.
Hang on.
Bunch of emails on
If we can just
watercolors.
if we can just grab them and make them part of the record.
They've just come in the past couple hours.
Okay. I think we have made them a part of the record, actually. So,
I'll file them
okay.
appropriate.
Any of those emails have prevented you from rendering a fair and impartial verdict tonight or decision tonight? No. Does anyone have any objections to any of the notices that have been provided for the quasi-judicial hearings? It's all yours, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. The first item is the Watercolor Town Center Homes petition to vacate plat. I'll ask Tim Weather from our staff to brief the board on this application.
Good evening. This is a petition to vacate plats submitted by Clark, Partington, and Hart. They're requesting the vacation of the Watercolor Town Center Homes plats consisting of 1.064 acres with a future land use of court-ordered overlay. The subject plats are located both north and south of the intersection of County Road 38 and Watercolor Boulevard. The Watercolor Town Center, a mixed-use condominium declaration, has been recorded in the public record that corresponds to and supersedes the recorded plats. We did receive public comments via email. I've included some previous emails in my staff report, and then there were a few that were provided this evening prior to the meeting as well for you from the same Mr. Myers. And we also, the applicant has brought in some subsequent signature pages from the time that the board books were completed until tonight. There were some additional transactions where they needed to obtain signatures of those, and I'll ask them to provide those to you guys for the record as well. But with that, the packet was complete. Staff did review it thoroughly and had the county surveyor take a look at it and review it as well. And all of the technical review committee had review and motion to bring it forward to the BCC. And unless other evidence is presented to the contrary, the requested plat will meet the requirements of Florida Statutes Chapter 177, Comprehensive Plan and the Land Development Code. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have of staff on this one.
Tim, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Tim,
yes, sir.
I'm sure you're aware of the email from Mr. Myers.
Yes, sir.
And he's proffered about, I think, 8 specific reasons as to why it should be denied. Have you had an opportunity to review that?
I did review it prior to the meeting, and between myself and the applicant, I'm pretty confident if we need to go through and answer any direct questions on it.
If you take number 1,
Yes,
he's talking about all these particular plats where they were recorded and these particular plat books and pages, and it appears that none of those are in this particular development. So
yeah, I think there may have been some confusion on Mr. Myers' part. These were recorded in the condominium plat book portion of the public record, where the plats that he is referencing are from the subdivision plat book portion.
So the platted area over there is proper. It's been identified and it's in the proper book and all that. Did our announcement or the paperwork that was filed for this, did it address the right stuff, and this stuff here is erroneous?
It did reference the plat book and pages that do correspond with the condominium plats that we are looking at tonight, yes.
Okay. What about these roads or streets within the town center? What's
The comments from Mr. Myers on comment 2, 3, and 4 are specifically addressing a subdivision plat, Book 14, that is not included in this petition for plat vacation. So the original previous petition we had that was continued prior to being heard by the board did include that, and that was an error that we obviously have adjusted, and that was one of the reasons to continue the project. And
so these statements as he's put in here have been clarified and cleaned up to meet all the statutory requirements?
Yes, sir.
Is the applicant present? You wish to make any preliminary comments?
We're just here to
state your name for the record, please.
Brooke Campbellwork, CAMPBELL-WORK. We're here to field questions. We followed Chapter 177. We have every homeowner's signature page to this. We republished notice to make sure the proper plat books were referenced, and that's where we are today.
Okay, thank you. Anyone from the public wish to make a comment?
And Commissioners, one of the reasons there's confusion is the subdivision plat ordinance was changed a few years ago to allow the recordation of condo plats and covenants and restrictions, and that's what happened in this particular subdivision. So oftentimes there are references to subdivision plat statutes that simply don't apply because it's a condo and it's a different type of recording and approval process. So just so you know, that's sometimes where that confusion comes from. And quite frankly, had they made those mistakes, this process corrects those mistakes. So, but they didn't. But had they made them, this process would have corrected them.
I guess my question is, because I'm really confused about this, what is their ultimate goal in doing this?
Yeah.
I'll address that. Kirby Williams, Williams. I'm a law partner of Brooke Campbellworks. And the thumbnail of this is these multifamily units at Watercolor were developed as a vertical subdivision back in the early 2000s instead of under the condominium form of ownership under Florida law for several reasons, one including FEMA's decision after the 2005 hurricanes not to allow these vertical subdivisions to be insured under their condominium form of special insurance. They had to go out and get special flood insurance outside of FEMA, as well as the marketability of these not being condominiums under Florida law for lenders that were putting their mortgages out on the secondary market. So those were two things where the the multifamily owners, the vertical subdivision owners, determined that, you know what, we need to convert or establish these as condominiums under Florida law so that we can get flood insurance through the FEMA program, although the vast majority of these buildings are not within a special flood hazard zone requiring it, and also so that there's no problem on the secondary market with the lenders. So we established condominiums. We had all the signatures, which was quite a task over several years, getting all the signatures of all the owners, consenting to the declaration of condominium, and consenting to the petition to vacate the plat. The reason we're vacating the plat, which I'm getting to the answer to your question, is to clear title. Now that all these units are described under a condominium declaration, there's no need for the plat. This takes care and cures a title issue.
Question: is Mr. Myers part of this project? Is he an owner?
He is not an owner in any of the platted properties. He is an owner in Watercolor, but in a single-family portion of it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comment? Do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Approved. Wishes of the board?
I'll make the motion to vacate those plats.
I'll second, because I know Brute wouldn't steer me wrong.
We have a motion is second. Commissioners, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, the last item on the agenda is the South Wall Street subdivision major development order in Inlet Beach. I'll ask Brian Underwood to brief the board on this project.
Thank you. Brian Underwood, Planning and Development Services. This is a major development order application submitted by Jenkins Engineering containing 5 residential lots on approximately 1¼ acres with a future land use category of neighborhood infill. The project is located at the southeast corner of South Wall Street and Walton Rose Lane and identified by parcel number 36-3S-16100-000-1210.
Okay.
There are no known code violations on the subject parcel. Unless other evidence is presented to the contrary, the project will be consistent with the Walton County Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code, subject to the comments and conditions stated below being addressed. There was a neighborhood meeting held for the project consistent with the neighborhood infill requirements. That was on September 30th of 2014. There has been one public comment from Ms. Janet Stevenson back on January 7th. She had some concerns about the project. We have Mr. Jamie Eubanks here to address any comments as well.
Okay. Do I have a motion from the board to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion is second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the applicant, any comments you'd like to make?
Yes, sir. Jamie Eubanks, EUBANKS, engineer with Jenkins Engineering. I did actually just want to point out one thing for one of the attendants who was at the community meeting. I know they've said they've had some additional pedestrian traffic in this area, and they just asked that the board would consider using the sidewalk buyout in this specific area of the county. So, pass that along. But I'll be more than happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I don't think I followed you there. There's going to be more traffic, so they support the sidewalk buyout.
Pedestrian traffic. South Wall Street has no sidewalks on either side of the road. They've asked and said from their experience that it's becoming a hazard, a nuisance. And similar to what Ms. Meadows had said earlier, they're hoping that the buyout in this case is used in this particular area of the county.
Well, and then to answer that, I can tell you that, where's the amount?
I believe it was 13,000 and a little and change.
That might build that sidewalk. That might build that sidewalk.
They had just expressed their concerns about that.
And of course, the developer could probably build it cheaper as he's building the project. That's why I don't like the sidewalk buyout. Is because the builder could build it so much cheaper if he did it when he's doing driveways and such. If we do it, we have to come back in. We have to, if it's approved, we have to, skirt over 4 driveways and retrofit and everything, so, that's just an aside. Doesn't really mean anything.
No, but that makes sense. I mean, if you're going to do a buyout but then want sidewalks anyhow, why wouldn't you include it at the beginning?
Exactly.
He's got 2 different reasons for that, Commissioner. The first is he's not looking to clear any of the native vegetation until he absolutely has to. So, for example, once he plats the lots until they're sold, he's going to live on Lot 5, but he hopes to keep lots 1 through 4. No reason to clear them until it's time, in other words. And in this case, the vegetation does extend well into the right-of-way, almost to the edge of the road. And the other, quite honestly, is he has no incentive to build it because it dead ends to nothing. Quite honestly, it serves him no purpose, so he elected to take the buyout.
So we could go in and clear the vegetation and make everybody mad.
But when, but to your point though, but to Commissioner Meadows' point, if you've got a situation, even if he's in there at some point in time, when he gets it sold out, why wouldn't at that point in time he go ahead and do it? Because if the costs are going to escalate over this period of time, let's say, costs are going to escalate for him, costs are going to escalate for the county as well. So why wouldn't we just make that a condition that when he gets to the to the build out or sale out of it, that you then go ahead and put the sidewalk in.
And I have Cindy, I have a concern about the recreational buyout, although I know it would go to you and not me. But I mean, we are limiting places where children can play in neighborhoods. So we're putting more and more children on, on public. I think children should be able to play in their own neighborhood. Swing sets, teeter-totters or whatever. I mean, I feel like it's important that children be able to play in their own neighborhood.
Well, yeah, that would be an interesting concept if we started out with that in the beginning. These are going to be beach rentals, of course, I would imagine. And if it were a larger tract, I would say, yeah, since it's only 4 lots, I mean, the ability to put any kind of meaningful child recreation on there is probably, not that great. But I agree with that concept. I agree.
And I know we've made this, there again, there's sometimes we can start correcting some of the, okay, I will bow to your wisdom.
Well,
quit laughing.
You're getting on both sides.
3 women right here.
Commissioner, before I go to the public, any other questions or comments? Anyone from the public wish to make a comment or question? Yes, ma'am, come up, please.
I did have, as she's coming up, I have one more question. I am concerned about the Inlet Beach Neighborhood Plan. I think these should adhere to the plan, and that's one of my concerns, that the houses are going to be taller and bigger. I believe that they should adhere to the Inlet Beach Neighborhood Plan and be the same height and as their neighbors. Then you're going to have a big house overlooking somebody's, and I just, so I have a problem with that too.
My name is Janet Stevenson, Stevenson. I'm here to represent both myself and my husband, David Swan, SWAN. We have been property owners in Inlet Beach for approximately 16 years. We owned a condominium, and then we purchased a house. Our house was within a very short distance of the subject that is being discussed tonight. I would like to hand out some photos that I've made of the area before I start talking, because I believe that a picture's worth 1,000 words, and so it would be helpful if I could give these to you. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
while she's doing that, I did notice one thing on the plan that said that the maximum allowable bedrooms would be 3. So that's interesting. So, you know.
Are they going to have a rec room, a film room, a billiard room?
Doesn't really say.
All with bathrooms?
It doesn't say. Anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No problem.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to mark these as objectors exhibits 1 through 4, if the chair is inclined to accept them into evidence.
Yes.
Yes.
Accept those into evidence.
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm here today because I believe that history matters. The question before you appears to be whether to approve a subdivision, but I believe the real question is whether Inlet Beach will retain its uniqueness and historic character. Let me explain. Inlet Beach is among the small bit of old Florida that remains in South Walton. Many homes here are classic Florida cottages, the concrete block cottages that the baby boom generation remembers from their childhood. These homes have been in families of some World War II vets now for nearly 70 years and 4 generations. They represent a historic treasure and an old Florida atmosphere that is even used to market Inlet Beach on websites such as southwalton.com. While we recognize that some owners of undeveloped land do want to build on it, we also want some assurance that these developments will not have a negative impact on the character of our neighborhood or on many of the full-time residents who call it home. A neighborhood with 50-foot tall houses that ignores the architecture of their surroundings and our virtual hotels will only encourage the further destruction of the historic character, ambiance, and charm that visitors and owners treasure in Inlet Beach. It appears that Walton County did want to discourage this when they wrote the most recent regulations for housing on neighborhood infill. To quote Chapter 2, page 14 of the Walton County Land Development Code, which was revised November of 2014, the developer shall be required to submit a compatibility analysis demonstrating that the proposed structures complement the predominant features of the surrounding neighborhood. This would be defined by building orientation, building setbacks, building heights, and general building type and style. The pictures I'm submitting to you today tell the entire story, not just the part deemed important by Jenkins Engineering in their compatibility analysis. The houses surrounding this development are all single or two-story, some of them historic cottages. I'm going to stop here and point out Exhibit 2 under A and B. You can see that I'm going to be talking about a different home that is currently constructed, but this gives you an example of what the problem is with this development. Opposite the proposed subdivision is a house that is a perfect example of the way government often lacks coordination and implementation of its own regulations. I believe that the building permit that allowed this house should never have been issued because it does not complement the predominant features of the area, and it detracts from the current structures by looming over them. We fear the subdivision under consideration today would have an even greater impact by setting a precedent that allows the developers to ignore the code requirements for neighborhood infill projects. Therefore, it is our request and recommendation that if the county insists on approval of this subdivision, some safeguards be put in place to assure that the houses that are ultimately built are not 50 feet tall and otherwise conform to the county's code for infill housing. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Well, back up. I've got a question for you on the paperwork that was submitted to us here. Normally, when we get the analysis from staff, it includes what happened at the Planning Commission. And all I see here is it had a public hearing and it was conditionally approved. And what were the details of the Planning Commission? Come on back up to the mic. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, sir. I don't recall. We did discuss the memo from Ms. Stevenson that she had submitted on January 7th. Some of her points are not totally applicable to this development site. There is one of her comments that is definitely applicable related to the occurrence of a single-story house immediately east of this development parcel.
What was the Planning Commission's, what was their conditional approval, and what was the discussion essentially there? Was there dissension? Was there concurrence? What?
There was definitely a discussion on the character of the Inlet Beach area and whether this proposed project would be compatible with the harmony of the community.
And what were the conditions that they asked to be included before passing it?
I don't recall.
Those were the conditions that staff offered in the staff report. I don't think they added any additional conditions.
And those conditions were the ones that are included where? At the end, conditions of approval? On page 8?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Which I can read those conditions if you'd like.
Yeah, they're all there. My question is what was staff's take on the compatibility analysis that supports the conclusion that 75% of the nearby properties are one or two story buildings, and that if you're going to go higher adjacent to another building of a higher height, that you have to set back an additional 10 feet for every story greater than that. What is y'all's take on that?
Yes, ma'am, that's definitely applicable, and it's our understanding that the review of the height for individual, excuse me, individual structures would be reviewed and considered at the time of the site plan review for building permit application. There is the single-family home existing immediately east of, I think it's Lot 4 of this proposed subdivision that would be subject to that setback language.
I think in that case, I think that these things should go on the plat, and when somebody goes in to pull a building permit, the building permit office is not going to pick that up. They're going to issue them a building permit for whatever they apply for if it follows typically the code. So if you're going to restrict the height on a home because there's an adjacent property, it needs to go on the plat, and it needs to be complied with, and if building department misses it, there's a disconnect. So I think the building department needs to be connected back in with the land development code and the comp plan.
Mr. Chair, if I could address that question. Brian and I went out and looked at this site, I believe yesterday or the day before yesterday. The problem is that we don't know what size home will be built on these lots yet. And so it could be a one-story home. If that's the case, I don't believe any additional setbacks will be required. If it's going to be a three-story home on Lot 4, then it definitely would require additional setback. But at this point in time, I don't know if the DO and the plat is going to specify what size home we built there. That's kind of the problem that we run into with that. Obviously, as these things are built, we'll definitely know by the construction plans what height it's going to be and what size it's going to be. And at that time, that's when I think.
And that time it's too late.
But we don't know what's been built there right now, so that's sort of the problem.
Well, why couldn't you put a note on there that says if this house exceeds X number of stories, then you must set back an additional 10 feet.
That could definitely be done. We could restate that in the plat.
We could add that as a condition to the staff report.
I would want it on the plat, on that lot in big bold letters, because anybody buying that lot, they are not going to see that if it is not on the plat on that lot. And then we're going to be dealing with a house that's already been built, and
why do you need 3 stories for a house that's only going to have 3 bedrooms?
well, we can't really dictate, what people, you can build whatever you can build.
1 bedroom per level?
But the fact that
Ms. Stevenson, briefly.
May I say something really briefly? Irrespective of whether or not there needs to be an additional setback, in my opinion, in order to be in character with the rest of the neighborhood, it should not be over 2 stories. Now, I don't know how many feet that's going to be, but if you go all the way up and down South Wall Street, there's all 2 stories. And the one across, except for the new one that was it's still under construction. There's one other house on that entire block that's more than 2 stories, and it's a beachfront house that's been there for a very long time. But even some of the new houses that were built close to the beach are 2-story. They are not these tall houses.
However, our code doesn't speak to that. Our code basically says that,
I would respectfully disagree, because I think the code specifically speaks to that. It says that it should complement the building heights as defined by the surrounding neighborhood. It says specifically building heights.
I think you could argue that a 3-story could complement a 2-story.
As long as it's not 50 feet tall.
See, it depends on what you're, but.
Are these houses within the Inlet Beach Neighborhood Plan, Wayne?
Yes, ma'am, it is. Yes, ma'am.
And is there any height defined in the neighborhood plan?
No, ma'am, there's not. And part of the problem with these terms like must complement, things like that, they're a little bit ambiguous from a staff's perspective. When we're reviewing these things, we're really not in a position for us to determine whether it complements it or not. We deal with concrete regulations primarily, and so it's a little concerning when you come across something like this that says it must complement or add to the character of, because we're then put in a position of determining what the character and what complements something. I may have an opinion that it complements. Mac or Brian may disagree with that, and that's part of the reason why when we have these revisions to the code, we like to kind of create concrete guidance and put the appropriate discretion at the level the board needs to be involved with as far as making the discretion whether it's complementary or not. But from the standpoint of reviewing a building application, that's a difficult task.
Ms. Stevens, before we go on, are there other people who'd like to make a comment? I'd like to let them make their comments first, Ms. Stevens. I will let you comment at the end.
While she's coming up, let me ask the applicant a question. Does the developer have any idea if he's going 2, 3, or up to the maximum of 50?
He does not. I would be highly unlikely that it's up to maximum 50.
Well, if I calculated this right, each lot could put a 3,000 square foot footprint on the bottom, and you go 2, you're at 6,000 square feet.
That's actually incorrect, Commissioner. As part of our stormwater calculations, we have limited lots 1 through 4 to 2,500 square feet of impervious total. That includes pools, decks, houses, driveways. So realistically, after driveway and any accessories, you're probably looking at somewhere under 2,000.
Ms. Lecter.
Okay. Betty Letcher, Inlet Beach. I do have a thing, because when this type thing comes in, and like the lots are going to be sold separately, we've run into this problem. And when they bring their plans in to planning, they don't go out and see what's surrounding. And we've already had this problem. It got passed because it was the building department's problem, so that person got the ordinance. So one of the plans, one of the developments quite a few years ago was that the only way they could get their development, because the surrounding homes were smaller and shorter, was that they, in their GO, they could only do a 2-story, even though in our plan, because we went by the county in 99, 50 feet, but the surrounding ones, and they agreed to that they're 2-story, and that would be something good here. And talking about taking up all the land with things, on having something where children can play, on that side street, Wall Street, there's a family that's renting there now. And I've had to stop twice to tell the children to get out of the street because there's no room in their yard to play. And I'm afraid one day one's going to get hit. But that would be a good thing if they could put in their thing that when someone comes in by, that's the stipulation, you can't build over 2 stories. Thank you.
Before I get back to Ms. Stevenson, any other public comment? Ms. Stevenson, please brief.
Just very quickly, I have to say that what Betty said is very much on point, and I've known Betty for quite a while. The second thing is, the way you can tell that a house is not compatible with the surrounding area is if you have a 2-story house and you're next door to that large, tall house, and you can no longer see the sky from your 2nd story, you know it's not compatible.
Would you like to make a response?
What is the land use on the surrounding properties?
Infill.
It's all infill. There's no RPA?
Right.
There's no RPA.
The nearest RPA area is about 1,300 feet to the southeast.
Okay. Okay.
Hang on just a second. Ms. Jenkins has handed me a photograph. Do we have a number for any of the prior exhibits for him? Or
Exhibit 4.
Exhibit number 4. Or applicant number 4. Mr. Chairman, you would accept those into evidence?
Yes.
Thank you.
Perpetrate.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman, what you have there, after we received Ms. Stevenson's letter on the 7th of January, we actually went back out, did a more in-depth analysis of the existing 3-story homes as well as those that have been approved for 3 stories via development order, and you can see it's fairly significant in that area. And then one other thing I'd like to point out in regards, I know it only affects Lot 4 from my discussions with staff, but the requirement that it's set back 10 feet per story, on behalf of the developer, we actually do not agree with that. And staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it says in the code or the comp plan, wherever it is, it only applies to parcels south of 30A. which this is not. This is east of 38 and south of 98.
Mac, is that correct?
And unless you have any other questions, I don't have anything further.
Okay, thank you. The board wishes to close.
Hang on a second, Commissioner. Were you sworn? I don't remember you being sworn. Can I just get you to stand up and raise your right hand? I'm sorry. I try to keep it. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you gave to this board was the truth? Thank you.
The board wishes to close public hearing.
So moved.
Motion is second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. What's the wishes of the board?
I would approve the project if they left the sidewalk buyout, we took that off the table. I think they need to build the sidewalk rather than us do it. I still want recreation, but I'll let that one go, but I would also, in my motion is to limit the height of the houses to 2-story.
We have a motion and a second. Commissioners, any further discussion? Motion's all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Anything for the good of the order?
One announcement, Mr. Chairman, if I may. We've got, if you're heading north, we've got some information that there's a motor vehicle accident north of 20 about the Freeport